Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto came back using shadow clones and has no other jutsu to show for his training trip. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Minato groaned as he surveyed his surroundings, one hand clutching his abdomen to protect his exposed intestines, the other arm hanging limply from a dislocated shoulder. 12 dead IWA, check. No other survivors, check. He swayed dizzily, body protesting at the abuse his probing search heaped upon already depleted reserves. Mission accomplished. Now I just need to make it back to the border. Turning towards the aforementioned and currently contested border between Tsuchi no Kuni and Taki no Kuni, Minato tried to persuade his feet to move. Ow, my head. Concussion? Stupid solo mission, and what does that make me for accepting it? Minato-chan? Huh. Minato-chan, you are injured. Something tugged at the lower edge of his Junin vest. Minato looked down. There was a child standing right next to him. Probably a girl if the neat brown bob was anything to go by. About 7 years old judging by height. Minato was absolutely positive she hadn't been there a moment ago. Genjutsu? He instinctively tried to form the necessary hand sign for Kai, but as his left hand was unresponsive and his right was the only thing preventing his insides from becoming outsides, failure was pretty much a given. Nato-chan? The girl said and looked up at him, giving the Junin a clear view of her face. Minato gasped at the black, star-spangled void that filled her eye sockets. Nato-chan, you have to come to Aniki-Tusan so he can fix you. Minato blinked. Ano, do I know you, Chibi? Not yet, Nato-chan, the girl said solemnly, but if you die now, the future will be very messy. Really? Minato felt his knees give way. He managed not to squash the strange little girl, but it was a very near thing. How messy? He inquired absently. Nato-chan. You mustn't die. The high, childish voice seemed to be coming from a very long way away. Minato's eyes rolled back into his skull as he fell forwards in a dead faint. Minato awoke to a deep-seated feeling of fatigue that saturated his body to the bone, which told him he'd succumbed to chakra exhaustion. The tight ache in his gut was an indicator of a mostly healed wound that had reached the Tuskar or not Tuskar stage. However, his surroundings didn't smell like the hospital. Yojensha-sama, your guest has awakened. Arigato, Gachukuro-san. That voice. Minato opened his eyes, blinked twice and turned his head towards the rapid pattering sound of someone running in bare feet. There was a black goose as big as an Inuzuka dog sitting by his knee. It had to be some king of summon, although the blonde Junin had never heard of a goose contract. That was both a relief and a problem. He may not have been captured by enemies, but they definitely weren't Konoha's allies either. Who exactly were these people? Ah, Nato-san. It was the girl with the starry eye sockets. I brought food. She held out a bowl of what smelled like miso soup. Arigato Satom, Minato said uncertainly, but I'm not sure I can sit up unaided right now. His abdomen twinged in agreement. Gomen nasai, Nato-chan, she said, putting the bowl down next to the goose before kneeling behind his head and hooking her elbows under his armpits. Ready? And up! The girl being rather small, Minato ended up with his head leaning against her shoulder and his shoulders in her lap. That was however enough to give him the needed leverage to drag himself into a sitting position without his healing abdomen protesting too badly. Once upright, he accepted the soup from his helper and drank it down slowly. Satom, anata no nami wa nan desu ka? He asked, putting the bowl down. Watashi wa yojenshi yusei desu. Konnichiwa, Yusei-chan. Watashi wa namikaze Minato desu, but I think you knew that already. Hi. Yusei blinked innocently, briefly cutting off his view of the twin pools of starry night that seemed to stare right through him. I am Yojensha, Nato-chan. It is not just my name. Yojensha. Seer and prophet. Akekai Genkai? He'd never heard of eyes like hers. Not even the legendary Rinnegan could see into the future. Yusei just smiled, a little girl with a secret. I am nearly 6 years old, Nato-chan. I have been Yojensha since I was 3.5 and you are the person with the most important future I have seen so far. Could you please not call me that? Minato pouted. It sounds girly. If you don't want me to, I won't, Mina-chan. Minato groaned theatrically. That's even worse. Yusei giggled happily at his antics, then stiffened abruptly, the star-like points of light in her eyes flaring brightly. Namikaze Minato, Junin of Konohagakure no Sato, student of Jiraiya the Gamasenin, heed my words. You are the linchpin of your village's future. Should you die before the war ends, Konoha will follow you to the grave. Minato froze, suddenly intimidated by the soft, sweet voice speaking through the bright, bubbly child he just met. If you need help, little shinobi, ask for it. Yusei rose smoothly to her feet and left, walking around the folding screen that separated the alcove Minato's bedroll was lying in from the rest of the cave. You get used to it, the goose commented. Pardon, Gushu-san? She's not all there, the goose elaborated, briefly stretching its wings. Comes with being Yojensha. Half the time she's seeing the past or possible futures. Hope you've got a plan, though, it added, eyeing him narrowly, she's always right. Minato thought of his village, his recently former genin team, his fellow ninjas and the woman he loved. If Yusei was right and it sounded unpleasantly likely he really needed to get that damn jutsu finished. That seal is wrong. Minato blinked, frowning at the interruption. Yusei had brought him meals 3 times a day for the past 2 days, as well as paper and ink for sealing to help him pass the time. He'd met another 2 geese, one of which had been taller than he was, and half a dozen fuzzy goslings. Unfortunately, chakra exhaustion was not a minor affliction, and he wouldn't be able to move far from his bed for another 4 days. I know it's wrong, Yusei-chan, he replied absently, I just can't figure out how to make it right. It is supposed to be a beacon and an anchor, Yusei said slowly, tracing the curving lines of one of the many discarded seals littering the area, but you haven't got the matchup quite right. You know Fuinjutsu? Minato was surprised. She wasn't even 6 yet. True, Kakashi-kun had been a genin by the time he was her age, but seals were one of the more esoteric ninja arts. No, not yet anyway. I know you, though, she added absently, staring at a point somewhere in the middle distance over his right shoulder, and as she flicked the seal he just completed isn't quite you. Minato felt something slide into place in the back of his mind, something that had been nagging him for years about this technique. He grabbed a fresh piece of paper and pushed it, and the calligraphy brush into her tiny, soft hands. What am I then, exactly, if not that? Yusei gripped the brush, smoothed out the paper, and readied the ink. You are, hands unbelievably steady for one so young, she dipped the brush into the ink. This. Minato watched, fascinated, as a design emerged beneath her dancing brush. The seal was elegant, intricate, and utterly perfect. He could actually feel it forming, his chakra resonating with the design. And there you are, Yusei murmured, laying down the brush. Minato stared at the finished seal, then at the not quite 6-year-old who had just drawn it. He knew that it would have taken him months, if not years, to achieve what she had laid out in mere minutes. How? Yusei shrugged. I can see you. All of you, who you were, who you are, and who you will become. Inside and outside, a comprehensive whole. This seal, she tapped the edge of the paper, is just me drawing what I can see. Oh. Minato decided that he didn't want to know any more about it. He had the seal he needed for his jutsu, that was more than enough. Now how to pass the time. Yusei-chan, would you like me to teach you Fuinjutsu? Minato fastened his neatly repaired Junin vest over the shirt Yusei had given him to replace the one the Iwa Nin had destroyed. He had fully recovered from his chakra exhaustion, and had even sent a toad to the Sandaime the other day to let him know that no, he wasn't dead yet. His new jutsu, which he decided to call Hiroshin, just needed a little bit of fine-tuning, and it would be finished. He'd also met Yusei's caretaker, whom she called Aniki-san. Taemaki was a tall 19-year-old with long blonde hair, the patience of a saint and the mind of a politician. He was also the geese summoner. Minato had had trouble suppressing his amusement when he first heard them addressing the young man as shogun. Teaching Yusei sealing had been both productive and terrifying. She was frighteningly good at it and absorbed his lessons like a sponge. He'd found himself promising to continue the lessons by scroll, and had introduced her to 3 different messenger toads just to ensure they could find her to deliver his letters. It turned out that they wouldn't have a problem. According to the toads, Yusei had a unique chakra signature that they could locate easily. Provided, of course, that she wanted them to. Minato had never met anyone who could hide their chakra as well as little Yusei-chan. The Toad elders had also expressed in Minato-chan's little student, which the spiky-haired Junin suspected had more to do with Yusei's prophetic Kekai Genkai than her sealing skills. Jiraiya had mentioned a toad prophesy once or twice. And now, back to war I go. Minato sighed, double-checking his gear before summoning the toad that would take him back to Konohagakure. Yusei, Taiyumiki, Gachukiro and 4 fluffy goslings had assembled to see him off. Sayonara, Minato-san. Taemaki said, a small smile lurking in the corner of his mouth. Ja-eni, Gamadeshi. Minato grinned at the geese nickname for him. One of the goslings had come up with it after their encounter with the elder toads. Mata-eni, Nato-chan. Yusei called after him as the toad swallowed him and jumped into the river. Inside the toad's stomach, Minato hoped the foreboding he felt at the idea of seeing Yusei again was just paranoia. Minato moaned, head clutched in both hands as racking pains shot up and down his body. He knew he was dead. He'd killed himself performing Shiki Fujin and hacked no Fuin Shiki to seal the Kyuubi's yang chakra within his newborn son, so why did he hurt so much? He felt like he was being torn in two by wild horses while suffering a monument-sized hangover. Gomen nasai, Shinigami-san, but I can't let you take Nato-chan just yet. That voice. I'll take responsibility for the Kyuubi as well, if you prefer. Was that Yusei-chan? How about an exchange then? 2 souls, 1 for each of the ones I am depriving you of. Yusei-chan, talking to Shinigami-sama? How did she get here? Those 2? They're both S-rank shinobi, Shinigami-san. It will take me years to get that good. On that note, where is here anyway? It certainly isn't Konoha, and if Yusei is here it probably isn't the afterlife. Or Shinigami-sama's stomach. Very well then. I agree to those terms. Arigato, Shinigami-san. The pain stopped, making rational thought possible once more. The white-faced god of death faded away, leaving Minato with Yusei, who looked older and taller than when he'd last seen her. She'd also cut her hair boyishly short, which looked a little odd considering she was wearing a formal kimono. Where am I? Tetsuno Kuni, Anikitu-san is visiting the daimyo. Why am I not dead? Yusei gave him a flat look. Namikaze Minato-san, you are very definitely deceased. In fact, you are a ghost. Feel free to check if you don't believe me. Minato looked down at himself. He was indeed somewhat transparent with a faint yellow glow around the edges. Not to mention standing through a table. Then why am I here? I mean, I performed Shiki Fujin. Yusei hopped up onto the table and punched him in the head. Baka! You killed yourself. The only reason you aren't being tortured in Shinigami-san's stomach is that when I found you dying in IWA I tied your soul to me so I would have time to heal you. You tied me to you? How? Kenjutsu, Yusei said flatly. Your soul is bound to mine until I die or release you. That's why I can touch you despite your being incorporeal, and why Shinigami-san couldn't take you. So I bargained with him, since you promised him 2 souls for his trouble, and got him to agree to an exchange. Minato, stunned and humbled, looked at the almost 7-year-old whose expression was far too old and tired for her face. He remembered far too late her admonishment spoken a little over a year ago. If you need help, little shinobi, ask for it. You said something about S-class shinobi? Hi. In exchange for lifelong authority over your soul and Kyuubi's, which corresponds to his yin chakra, since the Bijou are like animals in that they are divided into mind and body, unlike humans who are mind, body and soul, I am bound to deliver to the Shinigami the souls of 2 immortal shinobi. Uchiha Madara and Kakuzu, formerly of Taki, to be exact. No time limit, thankfully, but they have to die by my hand for the bargain to be valid. Minato dropped to his knees, floating just above the floor, stunned. Yusei-chan, you're not 7 yet, you can't. I know, Namikaze. Believe me, I know. But it is done now and I can't undo it. Should I renege on the deal, Shinigami-san will not just take my soul and yours when I die, but release Kyuubi as well. She sighed, flopping down on a cushion next to him. It isn't just about you though, Nato-chan. That future the toads saw may depend on the child of Prophesy, but for that child to prevail the immortals have to die. At least this way I get something out of it. I've fought Madara, Yusei-chan. He set Kyuubi on Konoha. I almost didn't beat him, and even though I won I only drove him off, Minato said softly. We have time, she replied simply. Now tell me what you've been up to since you last let her. You mentioned Kushina was pregnant? Minato's heart clenched. Kushina-chan. He couldn't hold back the tears. Yusei crawled into his lap and hugged him tightly, letting the former Yandame Hokage of Konohagaku no Sato cry into her hair as he mourned for his wife. Naruto ducked under a stall, dashed past the irate stallholder, and down the alley behind him. Through the hole in the fence, across the yard, over the far wall, down another alley around the corner, and he was safe. The nondescript dead end edged on 3 sides by a large, elegant but rather elderly building was cleaner than the narrow alley which connected it to a side street, but no one ever seemed to come into it. The windows which looked onto the small square were all obscured by blinds or shutters, making it even more private. The scrawny 6-year-old sat down in the corner furthest out of sight from the connecting alleyway and munched happily on the peach he'd stolen. Today was a good day. Well, who's this? Naruto jumped and spun around at the sound of the words spoken by a gently teasing female voice. Now then, nothing to be afraid of, the older, dark-haired girl in a fantastically patterned kimono said from the open doorway of the building behind him. I'm just curious as to who is sitting in our courtyard. Your courtyard, Nei-san? Naruto asked timidly. I can go if you want. I'd rather you stayed. Today has been very dull indeed, and you look like a fun person to talk to. What's your name? Naruto brightened. Watashi wa Uzumaki Naruto desu, Databeo. I'm gonna be Hokage. The girl's eyes turned introspective. Uzumaki any? Who are your parents? Naruto wilted. No, I'm an orphan. Gomen nasai, Naruto-chan. You just look a lot like a ninja I met when I was your age. He died in the Kyuubi attack, though. What was he like, Nei-san? The whisker-marked boy asked, curious. No one had ever mentioned his looking like a dead ninja before. He had spiky blonde hair and blue eyes just like you, although yours are a different shape, the girl said quietly, eyes staring off into the distance. He was a very gifted and hard-working ninja, and he loved this village more than anything. She paused. Gomen, Naruto-chan, where are my manners? Watashi wa Mutsasha no Hibana desu. Konnichiwa, Hibana-chan. You're really pretty, Naruto said, sticky hands held behind his back away from his new friend's clean kimono. Arigato, Naruto-chan. I'm a Minarai, in training to become a geisha, so looking pretty is part of my job, Hibana said with a small smile. You must be really good then. What are geisha? Are they like ninja? Do you know any cool techniques? Naruto asked, bouncing on the spot with excitement. He had a new friend. With Hokage who had visited him before he got kicked out of the orphanage, Ichiraku the ramen guy and Ayam who helped him, he had 4 friends now. And Hibana-chan had told him about a really cool ninja who looked like he did. Well, it's a slow day. Come inside, Naruto-chan, and I can show you a little bit of what geisha learn and what they do, Hibana said with an amused smile. You'll have to wash your hands and face, though. She looked him over critically, taking in his grubby skin and ragged outfit. In fact, a proper bath is in order, as well as a change in clothes. No, Hibana-chan, I don't have any other clothes. I'll find an outfit you can borrow while yours is being washed. Would that be acceptable? Naruto beamed. Hi, Hibana-chan. Naruto really liked Hibana-chan, though he also liked the other girls who lived at the Mutsasha Okiya. Just not as much. Hibana was special. The other girls were still nice though. They showed him how to eat politely, and how to read, and made him new clothes when they found out the shops wouldn't sell him any. When Hokage gave him an apartment, and entered him in the Ninja Academy, they gave him plants as a housewarming present, and showed him how to take care of them. Later on, when he realized that his academy sensei hated him just like almost everyone else did, Hibana hugged him and let him cry in her lap. Once he was feeling better, she even offered a solution. He would still go to the academy, but he would treat it like a real ninja mission. He would pretend to do badly and learn everything at home from books. Hibana promised to help him with his reading, as well as other stuff he needed to learn. All the Minarai and some of the Maiko and geisha agreed to help, saying that ninja needed to be able to infiltrate anywhere, so they needed to know all about other professions and how to fit in. Naruto agreed because he secretly enjoyed Himitsuoka-san's lessons, even though she was really strict. Himitsuoka-san owned the Okiya and taught all the Minarai. Hibana told him she was really famous. She even knew the daimyo. The day after Naruto promised to learn everything the Mutsasha Okiya could teach, he bought himself an orange jumpsuit one he had previously determined too bright for a proper ninja, no matter how awesome orange was to wear to the academy. He also bought glue, which he coated the chalk with before class. He nearly laughed himself sick at his sensei's expression when the chalk failed to write. It was the first prank in a long and distinguished career. By the time Naruto was 8, he had all but given up on ever learning anything worthwhile at the academy, instead using his time there when he actually attended to consolidate his official persona. Hibana had explained to him that a persona was like a mask, except it covered all of you, inside and outside. She had even taken him to see a kabuki play as an example of personas and acting. Naruto made his academy persona louder, less observant, and more cheerful than his real self. He also made sure to shed his persona at home and in the Okiya. He was safe there and didn't need it. In those 2 years, Naruto's education outside the academy was far more thorough than the one he received inside, and likely outstripped that of his fellow students since, lacking playmates, he spent most of his time learning. He was formally registered as a Minurai in the Mitsusha's records, although his gender had been deliberately omitted. His education was now divided between 3 different geisha wani-san, but he wasn't allowed to practice outside the okiya yet. His calligraphy had improved dramatically and he could sing, dance and play the shamisen to a standard that Himitsu-oka-san pronounced adequate, which made him want to bounce and shout with joy because Himitsu-oka-san was really stingy with compliments. Hibanin-chan was a Maiko and was gaining a respectable following, and the other wani-san whispered that Himitsu-oka-san was considering her for Atotorai, to run the Mitsusha after the Oka-san retired. Naruto had also learned more about flowers, colors, clothing and personal grooming than most fully grown kunoichi realized existed and had become very good at styling hair. In addition to these practical skills he had learned formal manners and etiquette mostly female, although Takamaru, the Okiya's lone male geisha, had instilled in him the basics of male propriety and taught him all the differences in speech men and women used. While in the Okiya, Naruto wore a wig, used female speech and responded to Naruchan. History and literature had also figured prominently, as witty and informed conversation was an essential skill for any aspiring geisha. Games, customs and cultures of other nations was necessary as well. Himitsu Oka-san herself had come to Konoha from Mizu no Kuni and explained that since geisha were civilians, they could cross borders fairly freely. Some traveled exclusively between the various daimyo's courts. Naruto sometimes wished that attending the academy wasn't compulsory for aspiring ninja. He was learning much more relevant information when he wasn't in class. He was not quite 9 years old when almost the entire upper echelon of the military police force vanished overnight, leaving chaos in its wake. Hibanin-chan told him that afternoon that the Uchiha clan had been wiped out except for the clan heir, Sasuke, who had just started at the academy. In deference to the dead, Naruto only pulled minor pranks in the 2 months it took the village to reorganize the police force. He missed some of them a great deal. A couple of the less stuffy Uchiha Chunin had even given him some neat ideas for pranks and managed to find out where they'd been buried so he could leave flowers. He'd overheard them talking once or twice about a guy called Obito who would have laughed at his pranks, or even joined in. They seemed to miss him. Naruto had received the impression he was a cousin or something. When leaving flowers, Naruto promised to do extra special pranks for them, and the friend they were hopefully reunited with. Now they were dead, they could watch his pranks without getting told off for laughing. Itachi sat on a boulder somewhere near the border of river country, meticulously running a cleaning rag over the blade of his ninjutsu. The past 2 months had been a nightmarish downward spiral ending in the massacre of his family the previous night. Now his clan was no more, the Uchiha line reduced to himself, his Ototo and Madara, their ancient ancestor. Itachi felt that the clan had been right to shun Madara back in the beginning. Shortly after they founded Konohagakure with the Senju, the ancient shinobi was clearly insane, and it was a shame that his father's generation had chosen to follow in the madman's footsteps. He had gotten away from Madara for a little while, but Itachi knew it couldn't last. The man wanted him for something. Probably his latest scheme for the annihilation of Konohagakure, Itachi reflected with a snort. His ancestor's monomania was more than slightly ridiculous for a shinobi of Madara's supposed stature. Sadly, he couldn't think of a more worthwhile way to pass the time now he had become a Nukenin. He'd been trained to follow orders since before he could walk. His newfound independence was probably about the only thing his upbringing had not equipped him for. You know, Itachi-kun, that the little display you put on for your Otoro has probably warped his mind beyond what even the greatest medic Nin could hope to repair. Itachi twitched. The speaker, contrary to all expectations, was not Madara. She was about 5'4", glowing softly white around the edges and slightly translucent. Wearing a simple white kimono and obi, her hair was tied up and not on the back of her head and her eyes were as black and star-filled as the night sky. She looked like a Yurei from a Fireside Tale, although the large scroll strapped to her back was somewhat incongruous. Who are you? Itachi asked levelly. The girl smiled wryly. Does it really matter? I have something of yours here, she patted the scroll, so I was going to give it back to you. Itachi didn't respond, sliding the newly cleaned blade of his ninjutsu back into its sheath. Whoever this girl was, she looked about 16 to his 13, but he had been an ANBU captain until this morning and she looked and acted like a civilian. She was a security risk. If she had indeed seen him use the Tsukiyomi on his little brother, and understood what he had done, she had done so without making him aware of her presence, which took uncomfortably high levels of skill. That she had clearly evaded his ancestors' notice as well spoke further volumes for her stealth. Her claim that she had something of his, however. I didn't leave behind anything that I am interested in reclaiming, Itachi said eventually, voice bland. The girl raised an eyebrow. Not even if it shares your blood. Sasuke. She has Sasuke. Itachi stood, sliding into a ready stance as his already active Sharingan slipped into Manjikyu. Give him to me. She lifted her hands as if to ward him off, body language relaxed and unruffled. Easy there, I said I would give them to you, did I not? She slid the scroll off her shoulder and unrolled it across the grass still damp with morning dew, revealing a series of seals. And I don't have your Ototo, just so you know. The ones I was able to lift are all considerably younger and smaller than he is. She pumped chakra into the seal array, releasing a cloud of smoke. When the smoke cleared, a dozen tiny, childish bodies were revealed. The oldest looked about 5, the youngest no more than 6 months old, probably less. His former clan's future. Itachi had killed all those Uchiha involved in the prospective coup against the Hokage. It had been Madara who had slaughtered the clan's civilians, women, children and elderly. Seeing the tiny, lifeless bodies really brought home what a monster Madara truly was. To wantonly slaughter babies was abominable. That could have been Sasuke. He looked like that once, so small and helpless. The ghostly girl seemed immune to the horror and gently touched glowing fingers to the forehead of the oldest child. There was a brief flare of chakra and the boy took a deep gasping breath, his own chakra suddenly exploding into life to Itachi's Sharingan. Ka-san? The boy whimpered, looking around wildly. Aniki? He spotted Itachi, who had deactivated his Manjikyu to conserve chakra, and seemed to relax a little. Itachi-san. The child made a beeline for the teenage Nuke-nin and hugged his leg tightly, tears welling up. He killed Ka-san and Nai-san, Itachi-san. Itachi stared blankly at the smiling girl, one hand carefully ruffling the sobbing boy's hair in an attempt at comfort. What did you do exactly? You are aware of the fact that your ancestor, Madara, is irredeemably psychopathic, hi? The girl hedged. Hi. Well, I swapped those children I reached in time with flesh clones, which Madara killed believing them real. Then I used a jutsu specific to my mother's clan on the children I saved so I could seal them in a scroll without causing them harm. Flesh clone? Itachi inquired, still absently comforting the boy. He wasn't very good with children and for all that he loved his brother, they never spent much time together. It's Kenjutsu. Created a flesh and blood body that the caster can use like a puppet and mold to mimic the features of anyone they choose. Kill it and the corpse stays behind, the girl replied, resealing the other bodies back into the array. Be nice to the kid, he just saw his mother and brother killed. I'm told you experienced death for the first time at a similar age. Itachi froze, suppressed memories of the end of the Third Shinobi War emerging from the sticky depths of his subconscious. He narrowed his eyes at the girl who was calmly rolling the scroll back up again. Why are you doing this? The ghost girl closed her eyes briefly, looking away. I was in Mizu no Kuni during the latest round of bloodline purges, she said softly. I promised myself I would do everything within my power to save those children young enough to start over. Madara was largely responsible for those massacres as well. In Kirigakure? Uchiha Madara was the Sandai Mizukage, she replied calmly, eyes cold as midwinter, and for his crimes committed in that office, among others, he will die by my hand. That assertion killed the conversation dead for a few minutes. What's your name? Itachi asked eventually. Gomen, Itachi-kun. Watashi wa Yogenshi Yusei Disa. Konnichiwa, Yogenshi-san, Itachi said politely. Ohio Yusei-san, the little boy sniffed, wiping his eyes on his sleeve. Why are you here, Yogenshi-san? Itachi asked. He was getting a headache behind his right eye. Well, I thought you might need something to do with your time now that you've left Konohagakure, and well, I have a dozen under fives in need of support, Yusei said, shrugging. I thought you might like to help since they're family. I know nothing about children, the Nuke-nin said flatly. Then you should learn in case you ever reproduce. Madara will come looking for me. I'm on a long-term S-rank mission from the highest authority to permanently end his life. Being around you will make finding him easier. Itachi looked down at the boy clinging to his thigh. I don't know their names. Give them new ones. That way it will be harder for anyone to trace them back to their former clan. Itachi was mildly concerned to realize he was actually considering it. He wasn't sure if he should be amused or horrified. Looking down at the 5-year-old again, he wondered who to name him after. Kamen, Inutecho, he decided after a pause. Inbu had been more family to him than the clan had ever tried to be. Naming his new charges after the masks of his comrades was fitting, and naming the eldest after Hataki-senpai was one in the eye for the deceased elders. More importantly, he respected the Kapinin. He was an excellent shinobi. Hear that, Inu-chan? Itachi and I will look after you, Yusei said gently. You'll have to help us take care of the babies, though. Can you do that, Koinu? The newly named Inutecho nodded, eyes wide. Good boy. Now let Itachi-kun give you a piggyback so we can reach town quickly. I know somewhere safe we can lie low for a while until we find a more stable base of operations. 3 months later, Itachi wandered around the fortified mansion Yusei-senpai had somehow acquired, bemused by recent events. The safe place had been in Okiya in the capital of River Country. The geisha in charge had been magnificently indifferent to the Uchiha's new status as an S-ranked muknin and had rented a suite of rooms to them. Itachi had then been the recipient of a crash course in childcare, as Yusei woke the other 11 children over the next 5 days. She had thankfully taken charge of the babies and toddlers, but seeing to the wants and needs of 5 children aged between 3.5 and 5 years old was more nerve-wracking than any previous mission he'd had before, ever. If ANBU candidates had been made to care for even 2 small children for a week before being considered for admission to the ranks of the elite, those who actually made the grade would probably be far less highly strung. He named them in threes, like genin teams. Of course, genin teams rarely had more than 1 girl in, but that couldn't be helped. Inutecho, Kame and Nico were the first set. Nico was the female of the group, and Yusei had used the seal to set a permanent genjutsu on her hair, turning it from dark to pale brown. Another seal hid her and Inutecho's eyes, changing them from black to gold. Kame had a seal which changed the bone structure of his face so it looked rounder and less refined than the classic Uchiha look. Yusei-senpai said the seal would grow with him, modifying his true features so that even if the seal was removed he wouldn't look particularly Uchiha-like. The second trio was made up of Tori, Nezumi and Yasagi. Oldest and youngest were both female, while Nezumi was male. Tori had a seal which darkened her skin heavily, while Nezumi had his eyes turned golden like his oldest brother and sister. Yasagi had been granted blonde hair and green eyes, making her the most eye-catching of the children over 3. Hibi, Tora and Kitsune were next, all toddlers aged between 2 and 3. Exact birthdays were yet to be determined, since no one knew when they were supposed to be. Hibi was the girl of the trio, as well as the most precocious. Hibi had been given purple hair in honor of Mitarashi Anko, which went well with her brown eyes, while Tora had been given blue eyes and had his skin darkened. Kitsune had dark red hair and similarly blue eyes. Again, minor changes in bone structure had been factored into the seals, ensuring that once grown they would not look unusually Uchiha-like. The youngest 3 were Ashi, Uma and Komori, all less than a year old, with Komori being the youngest and the token female of the set. Ashi and Uma appeared to be exactly the same age, so they had been officially named as twins. Both had been given green eyes to go with their brown hair, granting a surprising resemblance to Yasagi. Komori, who wasn't even weaned yet, was the family baby. Itachi had named her in a moment of frustration for her habit of demanding to be fed in the middle of the night. The only seal on her was a skin-darkening one, making her look like Tori. Itachi found the stresses of parenting paradoxically calming. After 3 months of 18-hour days helping to care for a dozen highly active and chaotic preschoolers, the prospect of conventional ninja missions was almost a relief. Yusei-senpai had promised to find caretakers so he could take up his secret mission in Akatsuki, and so far she had found 2 he had actually approved, both female. The younger was 10, an Oiran's daughter of Hyuga parentage, written clearly in her pupilless pearly gray eyes. While pretty, she was neither graceful nor well-spoken, which was why her mother had been perfectly content to sell her to Yusei-senpai for an apprenticeship. Itachi had discovered in the girl sufficient aptitude to make a good kunoichi and an excellent medic nin. She had also activated her Byakugan, so the Uchiha had not hesitated to inform her of her talent and potential. As a result, Nitsuki, nicknamed Megura, Mole, by the children, was as loyal and hardworking a carer as any parent could hope for. The elder girl was 19, fully adult and a properly qualified civilian nurse. Her name was Retsu, and her unemployment when Yusei-senpai found her had been due to the nurse losing her temper with a wealthy yet ill-tempered patient. Retsu got on well with the children, who called her Rhea Dragon and obeyed her when she gave them orders. She also made the effort to spend time with each and every one of them, learning about them as individuals and not just a means of continued employment. While Yusei-senpai had unanimously been elected the Ka-san of the brood, Itachi was generally addressed as an Iki, a role he was fairly familiar with. Itachi was not, however, allowed to get away with the neglectful behavior he had engaged in with Sasuke. Either Yusei-senpai nor Retsu-san permitted it, and Itachi had learned to be wary of the latter's temper. He therefore found himself teaching Inutecho and came to throw kunai, explaining chakra to Nico and Tori, playing ninja with half a dozen of them at a time, and teaching basic kata to all of the bipedal children at odd hours of the day. It was actually fun. He found himself wishing he'd made time to do it with Sasuke. Tadayama. Where are you, Itachi? Itachi set off toward the front entrance, careful not to wake Komori, who was fast asleep in his arms. She always woke up if he tried to put her down, so he had resigned himself to carrying the 8-month-old around the house with him. Walking down the stairs and around the corner, He stopped dead and stared at the man standing behind Yusei-senpai. It was the yondaime. Itachi had only been 4 when Namikaze Minato had died, but he'd seen his Hokage once or twice while in the academy. He'd remembered the smiling blonde as he rose through the ranks, recalling the man's heartfelt desire for peace and being determined to bring it into being. Konnichiwa, Itachi-kun, the living ghost said with a gentle and achingly familiar smile. You're all grown up. Yondaime-sama? Itachi managed to croak. Not for a long time now, Tachi-kun. Call me Minato, the blonde said, rubbing the back of his head in embarrassment. And yes, I really did die, but my soul was bound to this plane so I couldn't pass on. Yusei-chan made me this body, but it's just a short-term fix. It's nice to be corporeal again, though. Itachi blinked, swallowed and turned to Yusei-senpai, who had shed her coat and sandals, pulled a paintbrush out of nowhere and was now advancing on Minato, ink bowl clasped in the fingers of her other hand. How is this temporary, Yusei-senpai? It's just a bunshin, Itachi-kun. A Shintai bunshin, but nonetheless a bunshin. While Nato-chan will be able to channel chakra, in this body his reserves will never be more than low chunin in absolute terms, Yusei-senpai said, painting what Itachi recognized as a cosmetic seal on Minato's forehead. Once completed, it glowed briefly, then vanished, dyeing his hair dark red and his eyes gold. Which reminded him. Nato-chan? Itachi heard himself ask. Minato blushed. She was 5, he muttered, and it was better than the alternative. What was the alternative? Itachi just had to hear this. Mina-chan, Yusei-senpai said calmly. Where are the chibi? I want them to meet their new Tusan. Itachi was torn between incredulity at the girly nickname Yusei-senpai had bestowed on the Konoha no Kiroi Senku of all people and vicious, vindictive hilarity at what Uchiha Fugaku would think of the former yondaime raising the next generation of Uchiha. That Minato was probably the father of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki if appearance was anything to go by was the sauce topping on the dango. Itachi couldn't help himself. Are you laughing at me? Minato whined piteously. I told you it was worse. Not that, Itachi wheezed, handing Kumori to Yusei-senpai before his shaking woke the baby up, what Fugaku-sama would say if he knew you'd be raising the next generation of his clan. Minato grinned, firmly cementing Uzumaki Naruto's parentage in Itachi's mind. He'd have a heart attack, the stuffy tight ass, the newly disguised former blonde stated cheerfully. Uchiha Itachi, default head of the Uchiha clan, gave up all pretenses of dignity and rolled on the floor, laughing so hard he cried. It was shortly after Naruto's 9th birthday that his academy sensei started to teach his class how to actually mold chakra. This created a slew of new problems for the short blonde boy. He couldn't get the supposedly basic leaf balancing exercise to work. I tried really hard, Nei-chan, but it wouldn't stay on. Naruto complained, pouting as he went through the now smooth and practiced motions of a formal tea ceremony. In his styled wig, makeup and brightly multicolored, flower-patterned kimono fastened with an orange, chrysanthemum-patterned obi, not one of his classmates, sensei or other adult friends would have recognized him. What happened exactly, Naru-chan? Hibanane asked Kami from her seat by the low table. She was almost 16 now, and would soon be elevated to full geisha. When that happened, she intended to accept Naru as her Maiko Amuto. Naruto was a bit sad he would never get to be a proper geisha. Takamaru was nice and all, but Naruto really liked wearing the feminine kimonos, but he was still looking forward to it. He would finally be allowed to interact with clients without supervision. Not just that, but also travel outside the Okiya professionally. Plus, he could start earning and pay back Himitsuoka-san and Hibanane for all the pretty clothes and important books, ornaments, and other tools of the geisha trade they had bought him. His current predicament, though, made it hard to be optimistic. Abject failure always made him miserable. The dumb leaf shot off my forehead, up in the air, he grumbled, pouring his Nei-san's tea at precisely the approved angle. And when I tried again, it shredded. Then sensei shouted at me for messing around and called me stupid. It sounds to me like you were using too much chakra, Naru-chan, Hibanane said, sipping her tea delicately. I do know a little about chakra training, though I don't have enough reserves to be a good ninja. My one useful ninja skill is the ability to sense other people's chakra levels. You, my Naruchibi, have a great deal of chakra. A waterfall's worth, compared to your classmate's bucketful. Leaf balancing only uses a small amount of chakra at a time, and you do not have precise enough control to use such a tiny proportion of your reserves. Your classmates have very little, so using a little is easy for them. What should I do then, Nei-san? Naruto asked, sipping his own tea. First, I want you to meditate and learn the feel of your chakra. It is as much a part of you as your hands or stomach, so being able to feel it will help you to control it, Hibanane said firmly. Second, I will show you the 12 principal hand seals. You will practice forming them without molding chakra until you can make strings of them quickly and perfectly. This will make learning jutsu easier for you when they get around to teaching them to you. Third, I'll give you a book on hand seals to read. It will tell you what each hand seal does to your chakra and why they are used. Hi, Nei-chan, Naruto sighed. It sounds so boring. Meditating will calm your chakra, Naruto-chan, making it easier to control. Once you have achieved that, I will teach you a chakra control exercise you will find easier, Hibanane promised with a small smile. The book is to give you something to do in between meditating and to help you get ahead in your ninjutsu. Meditation did help, and the hand seal book Hibanane gave him was actually rather interesting, but it wasn't until his academy sensei introduced the class to the Henj no Jutsu that Naruto realized how useful chakra could be. The first week of Naruto's final year at the academy, the Chunin sensei finally started teaching his class actual jutsu. The Henj, or disguise technique, was the first of these, but it used such a pathetic amount of chakra that Naruto found it almost impossible to perform. Being sent out of the class halfway through the explanation didn't help either. That did not mean that he gave up. The whisker-marked blonde wanted this technique more than all the flashy jutsu in the world, as it would enable him to train as a real Maiko rather than just a ninja who could pretend to be one. 3 weeks of solid effort later, Naruto had it down. At least, he thought he did. His henj didn't quite correspond to what he could remember of his sensei's description. For one, it was actually solid rather than illusory. Secondly, his mass changed when henged into someone or something significantly larger or smaller than he was. With this in mind, he decided to ask his Nei-san for help. She'd be able to fill in the gaps in his understanding of the jutsu, since she'd said she had basic ninja training. He changed into his civilian outfit, which included a bandana over his hair and makeup to hide the whisker marks, and set off out of his apartment to find Hibanane. Hibanane listened patiently to his somewhat disjointed explanation, made him do the jutsu a couple of times, then sent one of the newer Minarai for food and drink. Once they were alone again, she told Naruto to practice his shamisen while she went to fetch Himitsu-oka-san. Himitsu-oka-san was very interested in Naruto's henj variant. She made him transform into several different girls of various ages, then made him take off his clothes while in henj and had him stand there while she prodded him in various personal places. Naruto didn't dare complain, no matter how weird what Himitsu-oka-san was doing made him feel. In the Okiya, Himitsu-oka-san was Kami. She stopped eventually and let him release the henj and get dressed while she talked to Hibanane in low, rapid tones on the other side of the room. Naruto-chan, Himitsu-oka-san said at last, I will allow you to become a Maiko of my Okiya in your special henj. Hibana-chan will be your Wani-san for as long as she remains at the Mitsusha, after which, if you are still Maiko, I will take you as my Imudo. You have talent, Naruto-chan, and I do not want it wasted. Many kunoichi could benefit from the training you have submitted to, but they believe themselves above such things. They are foolish. Ninja do others' dirty work for money. Nothing is too low for a shinobi to learn from. Naruto bowed low in acknowledgement and thanks. Your hench self will be called Benihime, the Oka-san continued. She has dark red hair and lilac eyes, and she is 13 years of age. I do not accept Maiko any younger, or the wait for physical maturity is longer than the time required for training. Hibana-chan will instruct you in how to achieve the proper effect. She swept from the room, regal as an empress. Hibana picked up where Himitsu-san had left off. Benihime-chan is to be as close to your real self as possible, Naruto-chan. Please go into henj and concentrate on how exactly you would look if you were a girl. Naruto obliged. The effect was fairly minor. His hair was softer and slightly smoother, and his center of mass was a little lower. Good. Now stay in henj, but make yourself about 4 years older. That was interesting. He could feel his body filling out, his legs lengthening and his chest expanding. Hibana helped him loosen his suddenly too small kimono and eyed him critically. You look just right, she said after a pause, other than the coloring. And you need to conceal the whisker marks. Naruto darkened his hair to blood red, his eyes to lilac, and vanished his whisker marks. He also slimmed his face slightly and tilted his eyes up at the outside, narrowing them a touch just to prove he could. Modifications complete, he stared at his reflection in the full-length mirror, committing his new self to memory. Perfect. Now put these on and listen carefully, Hibana said, handing him some larger underthings and a lightweight yukata. I think I know how your henj works. Not entirely, I have no idea how you shift it into objects, or where the extra mass comes and goes from, but I know how you change your age and gender. Now men and women may look and act differently, but on a basic, genetic level the actual difference is minimal. Your body and mind contain the necessary instructions and materials for both a male and female form. What makes you a boy is the fact that your body contains a short piece of code that mine does not, a code you received from your father upon conception. That code enables your body to produce two specific chemicals which ensure that you are born male and develop as such. When you change your gender with your special henge, your chakra hides both the code and the chemicals that make you male and pushes your body to conform to the new pattern, transforming you into your own female twin. The looking older is similar, your chakra fooling your body into believing it is older. The other changes are purely cosmetic, molding flesh and bone like clay and adjusting superficial coloring. The important bit, however, is that since your henge is technically ninjutsu, it is undetectable and won't break on kai. You actually adjust your body's shape rather than spinning a genjutsu over it. The only way to identify you as Naruto while in henge is your chakra signature, but incredibly the gender change disguises that as well. I can teach you to suppress it further, if you like. Now, and this is vital, Naruto, do your best not to let anyone discover that your henge is solid. If someone uses kai on you in non-mission-related circumstances because they suspect you, dispel the technique to preserve the secret. This jutsu could save your life and the lives of those depending on you. Because everyone assumes that no henge could ever be solid, your henge gives you a hidden ace. Understood? Hi, Hibanawa-ni-sen, Naruto Benihime, I'm Benihime now said, pausing to listen to how different his voice sounded. Good. Now you are Benihime, my Maiko Muto, and you need the clothing appropriate for your status. Follow me, please. It was nearly time for graduation and Naruto was nervous. His kotai henge was flawless and his kawarimi was perfectly adequate, but he couldn't do bunshin to save his life. Not that it ever would. Stupid prissy jutsu. He wasn't very good at throwing kunai or shuriken either, but that was because the civilian shops wouldn't sell him good quality weapons and the ninja shops were only open to people with a tight. Hibanane had taught Benihime acupuncture, how to throw saban and wield tessen, but if Naruto were to demonstrate those skills he would give himself away. Similarly, he couldn't use Benihime's developing taijutsu style because his body wasn't the right shape for it. Being two different people at once was harder than it looked. In addition to this uncertainty, Naruto wasn't sure he even wanted to graduate with this class. None of his classmates liked him, or even talked to him. In fact, they all treated him like the adults did, a mixture of disdain, hatred and willful obliviousness. Naruto didn't want to be on a team with people who deliberately ignored him. Plus, they were all a year older than he was. With all of this in mind, along with the fact that furthering his ninja career this early would delay Benihime's Maiko education, Naruto decided not to try too hard to graduate. On the upside, delaying gave him an extra year to improve his chakra control, weapons, and taijutsu. After failing rather badly, he explained his reasoning to Hibanane, who agreed that failing might have been the right choice, but admonished him to discuss it next time. Chibi. 4 teams from his former class actually graduated and started taking missions with their Jonin sensei. Having spied on them performing said missions, Naruto was perfectly happy to drop down a year and graduate at 11 with his age mates. Plus, Hibanane promised to get hold of some proper shuriken and kunai for me to practice with, and Takamaru Nai-sen said he'd teach me boy taijutsu. Naruto's 11th year was eventful. He actually made sort of friends with Rock Lee, a dark-haired boy with incredibly bushy eyebrows who couldn't use chakra at all. Lee worked extra hard on his taijutsu to make up for that deficiency and Naruto sparred with him regularly, both to help him and to improve the blonde's own taijutsu. Lee was very hard-working and very grateful for Naruto's support of his dream, which was to become a great shinobi without needing chakra. In exchange, Lee helped Naruto with his stances and borrowed a succession of different taijutsu books from the library, which they went over together and tried to learn from. Naruto's time studying under Himitsu Okasan had improved his memorizing skills from poor to almost photographic, so he absorbed knowledge like a sponge. Their only point of contention, which came up at least twice a month, was that Lee believed that a shinobi needed to know one strong style really well, while Naruto insisted that it was better to know lots of styles just well enough, so you could be both adaptable and unpredictable. Lee was Naruto's first and only friend his own age, as well as his first male friend in his own generation. As Benihime, Naruto was friendly with the 4 other Maiko in the Mitsushi Okiya, but they were all older than him since Benihime was 15 to his 11. It was kind of weird being Nei-san to little Momo-chan, who at 13 was the youngest and shyest Maiko. It also made it difficult for Naruto to socialize with girls his own age, as they were never as mature as he expected them to be. The other boys were almost as bad. Other than Lee the taijutsu fanatic, the only other one who seemed to be taking the whole ninja thing seriously was Hyuga, who was an A-class bastard and irritatingly fatalistic. Worse, he was a natural in the shinobi arts and effortlessly rose to the top of every single class. His Dijutsu, the Byakugan, and its associated taijutsu style made him impossible to beat in a spar, which he touted as evidence of his own genius. Genius, my foot! Naruto knew better. Niji had been born with a natural advantage into a clan of people who had long ago worked out how to use it to greatest effect. None of Niji's admitted excellence was his own work. He was a diligent student, nothing more. Real genius lay in adapting what you had in order to prevail in any given situation. The Byakugan was just a tool that made everything easier for him, when real genius thrived upon difficulty. It was amusing, however, that Niji's supposedly all-seeing eyes hadn't spotted that one of the girls in their class had a crush on him. That she was the only truly serious aspiring kunoichi in the entire class just made it funnier. Having been a Minarai since he was 6 and a Maiko from 9.5, Naruto knew more about sex, seduction and flirtation than most Chunin-level kunoichi and could probably in female guise outmaneuver a decent proportion of Konoha's male Junin. This translated into unmatched emotional awareness, which he hid very handily behind his idiot loudmouth mask. He was still amazed that people actually believed the mask. Honestly, could anyone really be that stupid? Of course, sometimes he couldn't stop himself from commenting on what he saw, but it still got ignored or brushed off as good instincts rather than experience-based intensive study. He had been pigeonholed even before becoming a ninja as a physical student with the brain of a stunned chicken and the emotional maturity of a 6-year-old. Naruto would have been more irritated at the slander of his person if he hadn't been milking the situation for all it was worth. Hibana Nachan had warned him to never underestimate the power of assumptions and denial. She had once again been spot on. People didn't see what they didn't believe was there. The exams at the end of his 11th year were more a chore than anything else. He did averagely in the written, pretty well in the weapons and taijutsu, but again failed miserably to pull off the bloody bunshin. Unfortunately, his other scores were not high enough to compensate for that failure. Naruto sighed, congratulated Lee on scraping a pass, and wished him luck with his Jonin sensei before slouching home. Why do they always test me on the bunshin? They're supposed to just pick one of the basic 3 and I'm really good at the other 2. It was probably because they knew he couldn't do it, Naruto concluded as he shut the door of his apartment behind him. They were failing him on purpose. Next year he would have a different sensei, who just might be less irrationally prejudiced against him. Of course he'd also be in a class full of clan heirs and rabid fangirls, but he'd cope. If they failed him again he really would call it quits and vanish, he decided. People actually liked Beneheim, and having the occasional bowl of ramen with the Hokage was no match for the everyday joys of friendship and fun he experienced as a girl. Itachi sat patiently in a dingy corner of the bar, waiting for Kisame to arrive. It was more than 3 years since he had become a nuke nin, and surreally, his life now was better than it had ever been before. Yes, he was supposedly working for a man who followed the lead of a psychopath attempting to bring about the conquest of the entire planet, but he had a family who cared for him and a partner who watched his back, which was 2 up on how Konoha had been. Kisame's here. Itachi glanced up as his real partner whispered in his ear. While Hashigaki Kisame had been assigned as his official partner by Leader Sama, Yusei-senpai had tagged along with him into Akatsuki. Leaving behind a high-functioning Shintai bunshin to look after the children with Minato-san, she had modified her form, changed her name, and stuck by him as he ventured into the lion's den. Leader Sama had only discovered her existence 8 months before this particular mission -1 in the eye to the self-proclaimed god, by which point she had already befriended Kisame, Iwa no Deidara, Akasuna no Sasori, Konan, and weirdly, Zetsu. Itachi had no idea how or why, but both of the plant-human hybrid's personalities liked her tremendously. The Uchiha had the plants on his windowsill to prove it. Itachi had learned a lot about Yusei-senpai over the past few years, the most immediately important being that her Kekai Genkai gave her what he privately termed almost multiple personalities. They were all different versions of the same core personality, each with their own differing skills and backgrounds. Some of them were even male, which had been awkward at times. Senpai called them personi, or when she was in a detached mood, pawns. Her current persona was Aimrei, the rain ghost, and her character matched her name. She was transparent to the point of intangibility. A Mirai's chakra also blended in with ambient levels so well she was undetectable even to his Sharingan. She could make herself both visible and solid, but it was an effort that left her very vulnerable to attack. When visible, her hair was white, hanging loosely over her face with the ends brushing her shoulders. Her skin was pale with the veins showing blue underneath. Even the skin inside her mouth was bluish. Her eyes were blank black, the absence of the stars more troubling to Itachi than any of her other alterations. She wore one of Itachi's Akatsuki cloaks with the signature red clouds, which was ridiculously overlarge on her fragile, child-sized frame, and never wore tabi or sandals. Since she was small and so light she was practically insubstantial, Itachi didn't mind the fact she spent almost all of her time clinging to his back. Everyone in Akatsuki knew Aimrei never walked anywhere. Instead she went everywhere with Itachi, ate, traveled, fought, washed, slept on her perch on his back. Others were occasionally favored with her presence, though it was rare. 14 months into her acquaintance with Kisame, she had abruptly climbed onto him and let him carry her for 2 whole days before retreating back to Itachi. There had been random repeats of this behavior every now and then. The shark Nin didn't seem to mind it at all. He apparently relished the fact that Aimrei trusted him enough to fall asleep on him at night. It was well known to everyone in Akatsuki that Aimrei did not understand the concept of personal space, as Deidara discovered to his utter bemusement one morning when he woke up to find her curled around his chest. Nor did she pay the slightest bit of attention to the word no or variations thereof unless Itachi said it, as Sasori had found out. He still had no idea how she'd managed to get hold of his Sandame Kazakage puppet, let alone work it. She didn't talk much either, but when she did it was always relevant and usually important, no matter how strange it sounded. She also spaced out a lot, but as far as quirks went, by Akatsuki standards she was fairly harmless. Itachi called her Senpai-chan, and had been designated by Leader Sama as her minder since she actually listened to him. Aimrei was invulnerable to conventional attacks and an exceptional censor, but her spaciness meant she couldn't become one of Akatsuki's inner circle. Her inability to pick up the membership ring settled her position as adjacent to the top ranks rather than within them. Thus she was now officially the 3rd member of the Kisame and Itachi partnership rather than just unofficially. "Hey, Itachi!" Kisame dumped the bottle of sake and 2 servings of dango on the table and folded himself into the booth. Itachi picked up a stick of dango and helped himself, Aimrei stealing bits over his shoulder. "Anything?" Itachi asked quietly. "Target's gone. Some bastards killed him already," Kisame grumbled. "I hate missing a fight. Is there anyone I can kill in this damn town without attracting too much attention?" Amiriai's head shot up, eyes unfocused as she stared into the middle distance towards the bar area. "Senpai-chan?" Itachi murmured inquiringly. "Konoha ninja, white lightning," she said, voice quiet yet clear enough for both Nuke Nin to hear, with 8 IWA Nin targeting him. "They stole your prize," she caught Kisame's eye, "and won't be missed." "What are we waiting for?" Kisame boomed, his good humor restored as he bounced out of his seat and fingered the handle of his infamous sword, Samahata. "I say we get some payback, a workout, and maybe even pick up a few bounties." "Hurry," Aimrei whispered as the former Kiri Nin muscled his way out of the bar. "The Leaf Nin is special." Itachi hurried after his blue-skinned partner, Sharingan whirling and loosening his ninjutsu in its sheath. "Special?" he asked. The world circles around him. His actions matter, his words have weight. The odd-eyed wolf dog is necessary. Silver and blood, loss, sacrifice and sorrow, Aimrei rambled, flickering in and out of sight in agitation. Outside and inside, through and through. Lost in yesterday and blind to tomorrow. She turned her eyes to meet his, stars igniting in her dilated pupils. "We need him, Tachi-chan. We are all together, but without him we will never be whole." "I won't let Kisame kill him," Itachi promised, speeding up to a dead run towards the sounds of the fight. Being a ninja, Hatake Kakashi accepted that one day he would die. However, he would have preferred that day not be today. His mission was in shambles. The contact he was supposed to be retrieving a scroll from had been killed by IWA Nin shortly before he arrived at the contact point. Said IWA Nin were now doing their best to ensure he joined the man in the afterlife. Kakashi was an elite Junin, but 8 against 1 was excessive even by his standards. That 3 of the 8 were Junin made it worse. The kicker, however, was that the lead IWA Junin turned out against all the odds to be wind-natured. To Sharingan no Kakashi, whose lightning affinity strong against earth, weak against wind was infamous, it was a match made by vengeful Kami in the lowest circle of hell. He had managed to kill 2 of the Chunin, critically injure a 3rd and seriously maim the 2nd strongest Junin when the battlefield was blasted by a tidal wave, sweeping everyone off their feet. A wounded Kakashi staggered upright in the aftermath of the overpowered sway. Unjust to it couldn't be anything else this far from a notable water source gripping a kunai in his fist, and fighting off blood loss, and the fatigue of keeping his Sharingan active for so long. He had just got his bearings and located his adversaries when Hashigaki Kisame, Nuke Nin and former member of the 7 Swordsmen in the Mist, charged into the fray, bellowing in fierce berserker joy and swinging his sword, Samahata, with gleeful abandon. The surviving Chunin fell like 9 pins and the maimed Junin had his head bludgeoned clean off in that first, bloody charge. The lead Junin turned to run while his last surviving associate tried futilely to hold off the gigantic, blue-skinned swordsman, but the wind user found himself staring into the triple-tomoed Sharingan eyes of Uchiha Itachi. Caught in a genjutsu, the IWA Nin never had a chance. Leaving Kisame to toy with his prey, the Nuke Nin advanced under the injured Konoha Junin. Kakashi's last thought before the world went black was, "I am so screwed this time." All things considered, Kakashi had not really expected to wake up. Even if Itachi had, for some insane reason, decided to keep him alive for interrogation purposes, the bed he was lying in was entirely anomalous. As was the lack of restraints. Of course, wounds and borderline chakra exhaustion ensured that he couldn't move far even if he wanted to, but still. A noise to his right prompted him to turn his head in search of its source, profoundly grateful that his captors had left his mask on and pulled his hitai down over his Sharingan. Hashigaki Kisame, the monster in the mist, blue-skinned and blue-haired with gills and pointy teeth, was lounging on the floor by the bedroom door and cleaning blood off his scaled sword with steady, repetitive movements. Again, somewhat in line with imprisonment etiquette, the captive must be guarded, after all. Said guard is however usually on the other side of the door from the prisoner. Kakashi cleared his throat. Yo. Kisame glanced up at him, then went back to cleaning the blood off his blade. About time you woke up, Senpai Chibi was fretting. Senpai, Chibi? This was surreal. Is it a genjutsu of some kind? Interrogation through mental confusion? Hi. Nice girl, not all there in the head though. Seems to think you're important. The shark Nin narrowed his eyes at Kakashi, right hand caressing Samahata's hilt. Hurt her in any way, shape or form and I'll rip you apart. It sounds like Hashigaki Kisame has a crush, Kakashi thought hazily. Hashigaki Kisame, rogue member of the Seven Swordsmen, monster in the mist, has a crush on a girl he calls Senpai Chibi. It was like finding out Orochimaru of the Sannin had a pet rabbit called Fluffy. Mutant-scaled bunnies danced in his mind's eye as he reviewed his situation. His wounds had been cleaned, bandaged and partially healed, and he still had his mask and hitai. Unfortunately, that was all he had on other than his boxers. He was suffering from borderline chakra exhaustion, lying in a bed in a small room with infamous Kirin Nuke-nin Hashigaki Kisame, who incidentally was wearing a black cloak with a red cloud pattern. Said Nuke-nin had also rescued him from Iwa Nin alongside former Konoha Nin Uchiha Itachi. I think my life took a left turn into Crazy Town while I was out. The room's only door opened, revealing Itachi wearing a cloak that matched Kisame's and carrying a tray. The Uchiha placed the tray beside the bed, eyeing Kakashi carefully. Kakashi stared back, still unsure whether or not this was a new kind of genjutsu, or possibly a fever-induced delirium dream. Can you sit up, Hataki-san? Itachi inquired neutrally. With a bit of effort the silver-haired shinobi levered himself into a sitting position, propping his back up against the pillows. The Uchiha handed him a bowl of oden and a set of chopsticks, then slipped deftly out of range. Kakashi decided to eat the food. The situation was so unbelievable his instincts had short-circuited. He was able to take his time, as Kisame only had eyes for Samahata and Itachi seemed to find the ceiling oddly fascinating. The silence, broken only by the swish of the leather cleaning cloth and the clicking of chopsticks, was awkwardly oppressive. His meal finished, Kakashi put both bowl and chopsticks back on the tray and turned to watch Itachi, who seemed to be the person in charge. Unless Senpai Chibi, who I haven't seen yet, is. The Uchiha slid the tray away from the bed and carried it over to the door, gently nudging Kisame's ribs with his foot as he did so. Give Senpai-chan some privacy. You can ask your questions later. Who's Senpai-chan? Kakashi asked. There were only 3 people in the cramped room, all of them male. Me, said a soft, feminine voice far too close to his left ear. Kakashi spun his head around so fast he almost cricked his neck, then retreated as far as he could into the cushions supporting his back, heart thumping and adrenaline pumping, wishing he had his armored Junin vest on instead of just a few layers of bandages. There was a girl in an oversized cloak that matched the 2 Nuke-nin kneeling on his lap, the top of her bowed head scant inches from his face. He hadn't sensed her at all. The hell? Itachi bowed politely to the apparition as Kisame grudgingly rose to his feet. I leave him to you, senpai. Please inform me of your decisions once you have determined an appropriate course of action, the Uchiha murmured, pushing Kisame out of the door and closing it behind them. Kakashi hadn't taken his eye off the girl in his lap for so much as an instant. She still wasn't there to his chakra sense, and by the feel of his legs she had nowhere near enough mass to be real. He gingerly put his hands together in the ram seal. Kai. Nothing happened. Not even the slightest ripple. I'm real, the girl whispered, lifting her head to reveal star-spangled darkness where most people had eyeballs, peeking cutely through untidy white bangs. Her mass increased abruptly, and she sunk into his lap, knees sliding apart to settle around his thighs. She looked larger, though still fairly petite and fragile. Under his fascinated gaze her hair darkened to caramel and lengthened until the ends trailed past her hips onto the blanket. Color bloomed in her face, making her look so much more alive as his ears caught a soft, rapid heartbeat, and the scent of her skin teased his nose. How on earth is that possible? Kakashi asked faintly. He could even sense her chakra now, thick, heavy, and slightly sweet with an undertone of midnight breeze. I am a wind master, she said simply, as if it answered his question. Perhaps it did. What's going on? Might as well ask. It's not every day a person gets rescued by Nuke Nin. The girl stared into his eye. You are Hatake Kakashi, Sharingan no Kakashi, Copy Nin and son of the Konoha no Shiroi Kiba. A fingertip caressed the thin line of skin between the bottom of his Hittite and the upper edge of his mask. You stand still and the world moves around you. She laced the slender fingers of her left hand into the stronger, longer fingers of his right. I have many names, many faces, many duties and more memories than any mind should hold. Will you see me? Kakashi knew that there was more to the request than met the eye, but having a lapful of pretty girl teasing him with gentle caresses made it hard to concentrate. Besides, she doesn't seem to mean me any harm. If anything, the vibe I'm getting is rather like the one you get off frontline ANBU medics, someone for whom healing is as necessary as breathing, yet has seen so much death and pain they damage something inside themselves that no amount of medical ninjutsu can fix. He felt like that himself most days, except he was a killer through and through rather than a healer. I'll see you, he agreed quietly, tracing her jawline with his free hand. Her shivery reaction was very gratifying to his ego. The still unnamed girl pushed up his Hittite, caught his left hand in her right, and met his eyes squarely. I am Genseizan Amamihana, Rikage Yojensha and heir to the Sanju Shikaku Kekai Genkai, she said clearly, her chakra reaching out to envelop him in its embrace. See me. Kakashi felt himself fall into the starry void, but was unable to prevent it. He saw a toddler, a little girl, sentenced to death because her Kekai Genkai made her a threat. He saw a 16-year-old boy abandon family, love and duty to save the child's life. He saw a tall man with curly hair and 8 mismatched swords strapped to his back, hilts in a fan-like array. Watched a perfectly coiffed geisha serve tea to the fire daimyo. Witnessed the bloodline massacres of Mizuno Kuni, where despite everything she could never rescue more than a handful of children at a time. Felt the world bend around him, past, present and possible futures all clamoring for attention. Then the world twisted and stilled, and he saw himself on the battlefield against the IWA ninja, pale and wounded. The clarity and silence of that instant shook him to the core as he realized why Amamihana had so desperately wanted him to see her. In a world of confusion and clamor, he was a fixed point of silence and peace. The eye of the storm. Then the pain started. Being overlooked by his father in favor of never-ending missions and other ninja duties. Coming home one night to find his father dead by his own blade in a pool of drying blood. Obito arguing with him. Obito half buried under a rockfall. Rin. Minato-sensei collapsing like a puppet with the strings cut as the Kyubi no Yoko dissolved into nothingness. The bodies of ANBU comrades, a dozen different masks, like broken dolls on ground dyed red with their blood. If Kakashi had been able to find his voice, he would have screamed himself hoarse. The pain was beyond anything he had ever experienced. Then cool relief washed over him and the pain faded away to almost nothing, the twinge of an old scar rather than the burn of an open wound. Reality rushed back and Kakashi blinked dizzily. For the first time he could remember quite possibly ever he didn't feel a knotted ache in his heart. He felt whole. No, more than whole, complete. He pulled his Hittite down over his not Obito's anymore but mine, he gave it to me Sharingan eye and looked down at the pretty girl in his lap, who had slumped forward once he had broken eye contact, her forehead resting against his shoulder. Genseizan Amamihana, Rikage Yojensha. Aimchan, geisha, seal expert, wind mistress, genjutsu specialist, healer and seer. He knew her better than he'd ever known anyone, maybe even himself, and she healed the wounds in his heart and soul. Aimchan? He stroked the back of her head tenderly. She looked up at him, bleary-eyed with exertion. Hi, Kashi-kun? Kakashi yanked his mask down in one swift, deliberate movement, firmly gripped the nape of her neck and pulled her into a kiss. The feel of her lips against his set his nerves afire, and he pulled her closer, exploring the inside of her mouth with his tongue. He could feel her heart pounding in time with his as one of her hands tangled in his hair and the other caressed down his spine, the bandages where wounds had been the only thing between his skin and her teasing fingertips. He had barely started investigating her figure through the oversized coat she wore when a wave of dizzy exhaustion collapsed him back into the pillows. Kashi-kun? Aim asked anxiously, leaning over him and stroking his shoulder. Kakashi chuckled weakly. You know, I'd completely forgotten I had chakra exhaustion. Here I am with a beautiful woman in my lap and I haven't the energy to do anything about it. Aim blushed pinkly. Ano, Kashi-kun, would you mind my staying with you while you sleep? Aim liked touching and holding on to people, Kakashi remembered from his little mental trip. It helped her keep track of who, where and when she was. Of course you can. He paused thoughtfully. What are you wearing under that cloak anyway? Aim blinked blankly. Underneath? Kakashi closed his eye and took several deep, calming breaths. I hate chakra exhaustion, he said evenly, glaring as Aim giggled behind her hand. Just one question though, Aim-chan. Why? Why me? Why do it at all? Aim paused thoughtfully. My Kekai Genkai, the Sanju Shikaku, triple vision that opens my mind to past, present and futures, turns me into a boat on a stormy sea without anchor, rudder or any means of charting my course. To compensate for this directionlessness, when we meet our soulmate, our one perfect counter, we know them instantly. There is no one else like you to me. You give me peace and clarity. Let me be myself rather than just a shell gifted with an overwhelming Kekai Genkai. I had not even realized how lost I was until I found you. She snuggled against him under the blanket. I love you, Kakashi, not just for that but because I've seen you, past and present, flaws and all, and you are so beautiful inside my heart yearns for you. Kakashi couldn't help blushing at her extravagant compliments. I've seen you too, Aim-chan, and I'll admit I am seriously attracted, but beyond that, well, give me a little time, please? I've found you now. I can wait a little longer for certainty, she said simply, resting her head against his chest as her body went lax. Kakashi wrapped his arms around her and closed his eye, praying his strength would be sufficiently recovered by the next morning to show Aim-chan exactly how attracted he was to her. 10 days after his run-in with vengeful IWA ninja, Kakashi stood in the Hokage's office, waiting patiently for the Sandaime to ask him probing questions about his severely edited report. He'd spent a week with Aim, exploring their relationship both verbally and physically. While Aim was completely at ease with her total commitment to him, Kakashi was still skittish. He'd never been in love before, never previously been aware that an emotion could be so all-consuming. It frightened him like nothing in his ninja career to date ever had. So at the end of the week he'd asked for more time. Aim had agreed that Kakashi had to get back to Konoha and promised to give him space to get his thoughts in order and get used to his newly healed soul. She also gave him the address of an okiya in River Country that would forward any messages to her, if he wanted to write a letter. I'll manage for 4 months before the edges really blur, she'd said with a smile that had made Kakashi's heart hurt. Hopefully you'll have decided how you feel about things by then. Despite it only being 3 days since he'd left her, the copy Nin missed her already. Both physically she'd featured heavily in his dreams the past 2 nights and emotionally, he hadn't realized how soothing it was to have someone who just listened to you, held you and was just there for you. Which lead him back to the present, hiding behind his Ika while Sandaime read his butchered, borderline treasonous sin what it failed to mention report. He had mentioned Itachi and Kisame, but only as the people who had wiped out the rock ninja trying to kill him. Kisame had said in passing that they'd killed his target, so Kakashi had used that as a possibility to rationalize his survival. So Itachi just ignored you? The Sandaime asked. Left me to die, more like. He probably didn't expect me to survive my wounds so far from home, Kakashi replied, eyes never leaving his book. Sadly his Ika turned out to be an unsatisfactory substitute for the real thing. His mind wandered towards Aim every single paragraph, especially in the racier sections. So this healer patched you up. No idea who she was. White hair, black eyes, oversized black cloak with red clouds that matched Itachi and Kisame. Tiny thing, said she was paying a debt to Konoha. Aim had mentioned a Konoha shinobi who had knocked out a would-be rapist harassing her almost 6 months earlier. Of course, had the idiot actually got around to trying anything she would have slaughtered him, but the Chunin hadn't known that. Izumo mentioned encountering a girl of that description a while ago in Waterfall Country, the Hokage confirmed, cementing Kakashi's suspicions that those cloaks with the red clouds were significant. Why else would the Sandaime have remembered an otherwise irrelevant footnote in a routine Chunin report? Interesting how she felt the debt was owed to Konoha in general rather to Izumo personally, the Hokage mused, chewing on his pipe. I asked? She said, and I quote, ninja carry out the will of their kage and village, for loyalty and allegiance are absolute. Only Nuke-nin have the independence to incur personal debts, Kakashi said blandly. Aim had said that too. She'd also said she was tied to Hatake Kakashi, human being, rather than Sharingan no Kakashi, Kopinin. His allegiances and career only mattered to her if they mattered to him. I see. Go to the hospital for a checkup on how the wounds are healing and take tomorrow off. Hi, Hokage-sama. Kakashi saluted and left. The next month was trying. He felt twitchy and restless to the point of accepting extra challenges from Guy, which led to spending less time at the memorial stone. He still walked around with his nose in Ika, but that was more out of habit than actual enjoyment. The restlessness gradually passed, leaving hollow listlessness in its wake. In the next 2 months he was more late more often and spaced out regularly. The other Junin and Tokubetsu Junin came to really hate his HM? Did you say something? Which previously only Guy had been exposed to. The 4th month of his separation from his Aimchan began with miserable, rainy squalls blasted into Konoha by unseasonably cold winds. Kakashi arrived back at his one-room apartment one evening, let himself in and almost had a heart attack. Uchiha Itachi, S-Class Nukenin, was leaning against his kitchen counter, sipping tea. "This is a personal visit, Kakashi-san," Itachi said calmly before Kakashi could flare his chakra or throw a kunai. The Nukenin had removed his cloud-patterned cloak, Kasa hat and hitai with the scratched-out leaf symbol, leaving them piled on the bed that took up a good portion of the room's floor. "I am here for Senpai-chan." "She sent you?" Kakashi asked incredulously. "Who sends a Nukenin into his home village to deliver a message?" "Aye. She agreed to leave you alone for 4 months unless requested otherwise, and she will hold herself for that. I am here because Kisame lacks the restraint to talk to you about it without dismembering you, and we agreed you needed to know before we started on the grievous bodily harm." Kakashi realized with a chill that Itachi was angry. The calm, precise movements and quiet voice were a thin facade over a perfectly controlled pit of seething fury. Not 1 ounce of Ki was being leaked. "What do I need to know?" he asked carefully, horribly aware of being completely outclassed by an S-Class Nukenin 10 years his junior. A very angry S-Class Nukenin. "Senpai-chan is pregnant. With triplets," Itachi enunciated. Kakashi felt his mind short out in shock. Aim-chan was pregnant? He was a father? Of triplets? "She is 3 months into the pregnancy, just starting to show," Itachi continued as if he hadn't just dealt Kakashi the shock of a lifetime. "I, Kisame and others wish to know your intentions. Most of those others are also Nukenin, mostly A and S-Class shinobi," he added musingly. "Senpai-chan is very well liked." Kakashi briefly contemplated being hunted down by angry S-Class ninja and shivered. "So, Kakashi-san, what do you intend to do?" "I want to marry her," Kakashi heard himself say. "Oh?" Itachi raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Very much aware that his life was on the line here, Kakashi picked his words carefully. "I've missed her terribly. It's not home here without her. I know I love her. I don't want to be apart from her like this ever again." Itachi met his eye stare for stare, Sharingan whirling slowly. "I believe you," he said mildly, "but where is your pregnant fiancée going to live? Bearing in mind she had a very large family already that she won't want to leave behind." Aim had told Kakashi about the orphans she looked after, all survivors of clan massacres, turf wars and similar localized purges. The ones she cared for personally lived somewhere in river country, at least 12 of them, from what she had told him. "The Hitaki house isn't big enough, but the grounds it's built on are large enough for a bigger one," he trailed off. When had he decided he wanted her to move here permanently? He hadn't thought about his father's house in years. He suspected some part of his mind had decided he wasn't going to let Aim-chan get away again at some point in the first week apart, and had been plotting surreptitiously ever since. "Senpai can sort out the house. She can do more with seals than should even be possible," Itachi said, demeanor suddenly warmer and almost friendly. "Write a letter of invitation to her for me to take to her, and she will be here in just under a week, escorted of course." "Who's the escort?" Kakashi asked cautiously, the threat of extremely concerned Nukenin still fresh in his mind. "His name is Zetsu. He has green hair and is originally from Kusa. The left side of his body is white while the right side is black and the two sides talk to each other," Itachi told him. "Okay." Kakashi watched warily as Itachi shrugged on his cloak, tied his hitai around his forehead, and put on the Kasa hat. "Oh, and Kakashi? Good night." Kakashi's world spiraled away in swirling black tomo as he heard the distant thud of his body hitting the floor. Naruto was actually enjoying his final year at the academy. His new sensei didn't have a serious grudge against him, and a couple of the clan kids played truant with him now and then. Inuzuka Kiba even joined in with a couple of his pranks. His main problem was Iruka-sensei's uncanny ability to track him whenever he wasn't in Kotai Henge. This cut in on his time at the Mitsusha, forcing him to only work in the evenings. Interestingly, Iruka-sensei was somewhat sympathetic after pranks, so Naruto began working on some more outrageous ones. He promised the dead Uchiha Chunin he'd do a big one at the end of this year, but he had to work up to it so it would be a proper finale. His classmates were sort of okay, at least the boys were. All save one of his female classmates were fangirls chasing after Uchiha Sasuke, the survivor Hibanane had told him about. Naruto could almost see the pain and anger condensing around the silent boy. Sasuke was a very good student whose accomplishments were aided by all the various senseis' eagerness to help the last Uchiha. Naruto was a little envious of that helpfulness, but was very, very glad not to be the target of fangirls like the Uchiha had. Fangirls were a plague, Naruto decided very early on, a squealing, fluttering horde of obsessive social butterflies completely unsuited to the shinobi lifestyle. Only one of them, the Yamanaka, actually worked hard enough to eventually graduate. And even she dieted. Haruno Sakura might also make it, since she competed with Yamanaka Ino with a frighteningly obsessive zealotry. The only non-fangirl in the class was Hyuga Hinata, who was cripplingly shy. She also had a crush on Naruto and stalked him after school hours, making it even harder for him to get to the Okiya without being followed. Naruto acted oblivious for 2 reasons. The first was to remain in character. The idiot he pretended to be would completely overlook someone as shy as Hinata. Secondly, he felt that the person she admired so much did not really exist. He was a mask the real Naruto wore, no more real than a character in a book or a play. He did wear the goggles she left him anonymously on his birthday, though. Oddly enough, his favorite classmate was the antisocial Uchiha. Sasuke clearly hadn't a clue how to be friendly and had suffered too much to risk opening up to his peers. Naruto had talked to Hibanane about it, and she had recommended he offer Sasuke whatever support he thought the younger boy would accept. With this in mind, Naruto proclaimed himself the Uchiha's rival. While still extremely poor at any kind of written work, Naruto was in the upper echelons of the class in weapons and taijutsu. This enabled him to physically challenge Sasuke almost every outdoor lesson. Despite openly putting him down as the dobe or dead last, Naruto could tell that Sasuke genuinely enjoyed their spars. The fact that Naruto put up a solid fight before losing probably helped, and the younger boy seemed to find his outbursts about how next time I will prevail amusing. It was in an attempt to fan that spark of black humor in the classroom that Naruto set his eyes on Haruno Sakura, Sasuke's most rabid and hated fangirl. While physically the weakest of the potential graduates, her high intelligence and perfect memory pulled her grades up into the pass zone. Naruto was positive his supposed infatuation with the pink-haired banshee was a product of temporary insanity. It had overtaken him one afternoon when he was contemplating Sasuke's hate relationship with his fangirls. He had wondered if the Uchiha would find their antics more amusing as an observer rather than a participant. By the end of the school day, the thought had contaminated his entire decision-making process, and as soon as class was over he bounced cheerfully over to Sakura and loudly asked her for a date. The look on her face had been hilarious, her acid screech of refusal and punch to his head less so. But Naruto had seen Sasuke's reaction from the corner of his eye and it had been perfect. Sasuke did indeed find the idea of his most irritating fangirl having a fanboy of her very own darkly humorous. Encouraged, Naruto persisted doggedly. The cheerful imperviousness that was the basis of his idiot persona was used to optimum effect, and as a result of his persistence Sakura was forced to dial back her pursuit of the last Uchiha. This of course did nothing for his chances of actually getting a date, but since he didn't want one that wasn't an issue. Sasuke found him amusing and enjoyed fighting him, so he felt he was improving the quality of life of a fellow orphan. Plus he felt he sort of owed it to those dead Uchiha Chunin who'd been nice to him to keep an eye on their clan heir for them. If he ever met the bastard who'd killed them off and hurt Sasuke, he'd prank the hell out of them, Uzumaki style. The only other person of note in Naruto's class was Nara Shikamaru. The boy was scary smart and definitely had suspicions about Naruto's idiot persona. He was however too lazy to investigate whether his suspicions had merit. Naruto was clearly too troublesome for Shikamaru to deal with. The blonde didn't mind either way. Shikamaru was probably the only person in his class he'd feel comfortable sharing his secret with anyway, seeing as the boy was smart enough to understand and respect his motives. At the Okiya his time was far more productive. As a Maiko with a well-known one, Isen Beneheim was earning a steady income, which went towards paying her debts to the Mitsusha. She attended civilian gatherings, entertained in tea houses, played her shamisen or danced while Hibanane interacted with her clients. Sometimes she served tea or sake while Hibanane danced. Beneheim had even attended a party hosted in Konoha by the Fire Daimyo at New Year, where she had made witty conversation with some samurai she found shifting uneasily in their formal clothes at the edge of the throng. She made some deprecating jokes about geisha and ninja, praised their bravery and honor, and received enough money by the end of the night to have her remaining debt to Himitsu Okasan. But 4 days after the New Year, Naruto's life took a left turn. He arrived at the Okiya after an early dinner, as usual changed into his Beneheim Kotai henge and dressed for the evening, but instead of being given a commission was instructed by the Mirai on secretary duty to wait for Hibana-san in one of the secondary suites. Nervousness compounded when Momo-chan served tea and retired behind a screen to play shamisen. Beneheim had never been treated like a client before and wasn't sure what to do. Hibanane's arrival, in full formal garb, was both a worry and a relief. "Haim-chan," Hibanane said after Momo-chan served another round of tea and left the room, "I need to talk to Naruto-kun." Naruto released his hinge, revealing gray hakama bandaged at the ankles and a short kimono top in the same color. His blonde hair was worn fairly short, so it stuck up all over the place. He was still not very tall and was shorter than most of his classmates, but looked far less skinny and malnourished than he had at 6. "Good. Now Naruto, a lot of what I have to say will shock you and some you will probably find distressing. Please express these emotions, as no matter what I love you like a brother and will never reject you. Understood?" Naruto steeled himself for the worst. "Hi. Arigato. Naruto, I am not a real person. I am a bunshin, a special type of flesh and blood bunshin with the independence to look after itself without its maker needing to be in the vicinity. My thoughts, memories, and emotions are all copy from my maker." Naruto's bottom lip trembled and his eyes filled with tears. "You don't exist, Ne-chan?" But he sniffled, unable to go on without breaking down completely. Hibanane swooped around the table and hugged him close. "I love you dearly, my Naruto-chan, and so does my maker. Every night before I go to sleep I share my day's memories with her, so she knows you and loves you just as much as I do. Or I love you because she does, seeing as she is who I am copied from. You are family, Naruto, Ototo and Henjimuto both." Naruto clung to his bunshin Ne-san tightly and sobbed his shock and relief away, wiping his eyes on the clean handkerchief she offered him. "Why are you telling me now?" he eventually managed to ask. Hibana Bunshin looked embarrassed. "The original managed to get pregnant by a Konoha shinobi, and will be coming here in a few months. She needs me to see to things elsewhere, since she will be based in the village for the foreseeable future, and able to take over my various responsibilities here. You being the most important of those," she said, flicking his nose playfully, "can't have our Ototo being left to fend for himself, can we? Anabozu has a really huge adopted family, so you can be Neruji-chan and Haimbei-chan to the chibi." "Family?" Naruto breathed, hardly believing his ears. "Of course. She won't be here for about another 4 months, however," Hibana Bunshin explained. "You'll manage, won't you? Takamaru is here as you need Gai Talk and Himitsu-oka-san will offer you assistance in anything Okiya related. Between you and me, I think she wants Beneheim as her Adotorai." "Wow," Naruto breathed reverently. "I'll behave for her, I promise." "Now for the formal bit," Hibana said, resettling herself across the table from Naruto, face becoming blank and serious. "Since the daimyo's New Year's party people have been asking for Beneheim personally, and both I and Himitsu-oka-san feel you have learned everything we can teach you. Are you ready to end your apprenticeship and become a full geisha after your 6 years of formal training?" Naruto stared, blinked, opened and closed his mouth twice before stuttering H-high. "In that case, as your One-san, it is my duty to see that Beneheim is suitably initiated in sex," Hibana Bunshin said firmly. "Take note, Naruto, that this is only girl sex, as while Beneheim is physically 16 and old enough to enjoy it, your male body won't be mature enough for a few more years yet. I'm sure you've noticed the pleasant tingly feelings Beneheim gets around certain people?" Naruto blushed deeply. "Hi, Ne-san," he whispered, "some of the ladies at the party and 2 of the samurai made me feel strange like that." "Good, your girl form is definitely ready then. I'll give you the full talk, then show you what the fuss is all about. The original has been experimenting with your Kotai-henge and has found a way for girls to physically transform into boys, so I can teach Beneheim what to do with men as well, since I suspected you'd feel uncomfortable having sex with Takamaru." "Arigato, Ne-san," Naruto said gratefully. He'd spent most of his time with Takenai as a boy, so sleeping with him as a girl would probably feel really strange. "You're welcome. Now change back into Beneheim and I'll start." Naruto was very late arriving at the academy the next morning, could not concentrate at all and blushed randomly throughout the day. Irika found the speculative way his most unpredictable student was eyeing him extremely uncomfortable, and was grateful when Naruto's behavior returned to normal later on in the week. The emotion he was currently experiencing, Kakashi told himself firmly, was not panic. It was concern. Yes, concern. Possibly a little worry as well. He'd gone through his bingo book collection and found Zetsu, who had turned out to be a cannibalistic S-class nuke with a multiple personality disorder. He was also an espionage and assassination specialist, indicating that even if anyone in Konoha was idiotic enough to try and detain him, he would probably escape without difficulty. In order to avoid obsessing too much, Kakashi had cleaned his tiny apartment, chucked out a lot of junk, and rented the apartment next door to store whatever he did not consider a basic necessity so he could fit his girlfriend into his place until the house was ready. Most of his Ika ended up in a box. He would put away all of it, but decided at the last minutes that he wanted to keep up appearances. He hadn't mentioned his pregnant, soon-to-be fiancée to anyone yet, not having the faintest idea how to broach the subject. I met this girl, got her pregnant, and realized I was in love, so I'm going to marry her, perhaps? Or would he have to explain about her Kekai Genkai and how she healed him? She was technically a civilian despite her mastery of more shinobi arts than most Kages, so the Hokage trying to recruit her was a possibility. Of course, the prospect of a new Kekai Genkai would prompt a warm welcome among the more calculating members of Konohagakura's ruling elite, but Kakashi was dreading the fact that once his children were actually born he'd be expected to take up the Hatake clan seat on the clan council. Maybe I could delegate it to Aim-chan. She terrified them into submission in under a week, easy. He had no idea what to do to the house either. Since Itachi had said Ainkoi could deal with the house, Kakashi limited himself to boxing up everything portable and moving it into the spare apartment. This had attracted unwelcome attention and a challenge from Guy to stack boxes most efficiently, which he had taken ruthless advantage of, but most people assumed he had finally got around to selling the place. The day before Aim was due to arrive, Kakashi turned up on time for his requested meeting with the Hokage, signature orange book conspicuously absent. After a quiet kai by the ANBU on guard, maybe he should be on time more often. If this was the reaction he got, he was allowed into the office. The Sandaime was smoking his pipe behind what was probably a desk under all that paperwork. Kakashi? What brings you here in such an unexpectedly timely manner? Ma, Kakashi scratched his head, this is awkward. Sarutobi Hiruzen, nicknamed the Professor and Shinobi no Kami, looked intrigued. Really? Do tell. Important bit first. Well, on that mission I failed 3 months ago I met this girl. Oh? The Hokage raised an eyebrow. A civilian, technically, though she's got a very strange Kekai Genkai. One thing kind of led to another. I fell in love and just recently found out I got her pregnant. Wait. Sarutobi lowered his pipe, staring. You, Hatake Kakashi, have fallen in love? I never thought I'd see the day. Congratulations. When is the baby due? Babies, Hokage-sama. She's expecting triplets. The Sandaime actually dropped his pipe onto the paperwork, scattering half-burnt tobacco everywhere. My word. You don't do things by halves, do you, Kakashi? When do I get to meet the doubtless charming young lady who has snared you? Hopefully tomorrow, Hokage-sama. But Ano, the person escorting her to Konoha, is an S-class nukenin. Apparently he's a friend of hers. Kakashi cringed slightly, hoping this next bit wouldn't go too badly. Hatake Kakashi, the Hokage said, getting to his feet and walking around the paperwork monument so he was standing right in front of the silver-haired Junin. Your civilian girlfriend is friends with an S-class nukenin? Kakashi closed his eye hopelessly. Several S-class nukenin, from what I was told, Hokage-sama. They aren't very happy with my being involved with her. Dismemberment was mentioned. I suppose irate and overprotective family members are a universal constant when dealing with young women, Sarutobi muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. Do you at least know which S-class nukenin is escorting her here? Setsu, formerly of Kusagakure. He's supposedly some sort of plant hybrid. Wonderful. I'll write a memo to the gate guards so they know not to interfere. Should I also be expecting an influx of other angry S-class shinobi trying to kill you? And how did you receive this information? The one question he didn't want to answer. Well, funny you should ask that. Kakashi. I found Uchiha Itachi in my apartment when I got home last week. The copynin waited for the axe to fall. There was a very heavy pause. Kakashi briefly wondered if the Red Clouds people were recruiting. I take it there was more to that failed mission than you reported, Junin Hatake? Kakashi hung his head. This was going to be a very long and uncomfortable meeting. The next morning, Konoha shinobi were shocked dumb at the sight of Hatake Kakashi, Junin considered most likely to be late for his own funeral, lounging against the gatepost of the front entrance to the village shortly after dawn. As the sun climbed towards noon, the Chunin on guard duty gradually became aware of how twitchy the cyclopic Junin was getting. Kakashi looked like he was expecting to be ambushed by a 4-man Kumo ENBU squad and was hiding it very badly. Hagane Kotetsu signaled discreetly to his partner Izumo before wandering over to the copynin, taking care to make enough noise to avoid getting accidentally stabbed. Hey, Kakashi! What brings you out here today? Kakashi's lone eye, which was compulsively scanning the faces of passers-by from behind his orange book, briefly glanced at the Chunin before returning to surveillance. Kotetsu. I'm waiting for some people. You expecting them to jump out from behind a tree? The Chunin asked. I haven't seen you this jumpy since that incident with Anko 4 years ago. I suspect one of them is rather angry with me, Kakashi muttered, ignoring the jab completely as he monitored his surroundings with the compulsive paranoia all elite shinobi developed after a few years of having people trying to kill you. You could say that, said a voice emanating from above them. Both ninja jumped back, Kotetsu drawing a giant kunai and Kakashi readying his hands to form seals, book gone as if it had never existed. The green-haired, black and white-skinned individual who had emerged head and shoulders from the wall surrounding Konoha blinked gold eyes at them innocently. Is this Kanahigakure? Of course it is. Look at the Hittite. Moron. Kotetsu blinked at the man engaged in an argument with himself and tucked the kunai away. Yeah, this is Konoha. State your business? The man slid further out of the wall, revealing a young woman in a pretty kimono decorated with cranes held bridal style in his arms. I'm delivering Amamai Hana-san here to Hatake Kakashi. The last few words were snarled as the Nuke Nin released a short, concentrated burst of ki while he gently set the woman on her feet and adjusted her collar and sleeves as delicately as if she were made of glass. Okay then. This here's Kakashi. I'll just go, Kotetsu said, backing away before making a break back to where Izuma was goggling at the green-haired Nin, recognizing that this situation was way above his pay grade. Coward, Kakashi grumbled, noting that Setsu wore a black cloak with red clouds. He was sensing a theme. Kashi! Aim cried happily, smiling brilliantly and completely derailing his thought process. Why did I want to be away from her again? It must have been the same kind of idiot thinking that got Obito killed. The Junin immediately pulled her into a hug, ignoring their curious audience. It's wonderful to see you again, Ainkoi, he murmured in her ear. I've missed you terribly. I should never have insisted on being given space in the first place. Are you well? The babies? Aim blushed happily, Genjutsu created hazel eyes shining. Yes and yes, I've missed you too, so very much. Get a room. Aim-san, where do you want your stuff to go? Setsu asked, producing some large sealing scrolls from under his cloak. Give them here, Kakashi said. I'd rather not deal with the headache inviting you into the village is bound to cause. The plant Nin shrugged, Venus flytrap-like appendages emerging briefly from around his shoulders. Suit yourself, tree hugger. Stay in touch, Yogenshi Chibi. Hatake-san, for you, he handed over the sealing scrolls and a small messenger scroll. Just so you know, I'd eat you if she let me. With that he merged into the ground and disappeared. Wasn't he friendly? Kakashi said breezily, feeling a little giddy from having escaped retribution and seeing touching Aim-chan again. Come on, Aim-chan, I'll show you where you're staying for now. He shoved the message scroll in his pouch, tucked the sealing scrolls firmly under one arm and wrapped the other around Aim's waist. He nodded to the gaping crowd. Ja-eni, he said with an eye smile and shunshined away, leaving a few leaves in his wake. Izuma looked over at his partner. So, did you know Hatake had a girlfriend, Kotetsu? At Kakashi's apartment, the silver-haired shinobi dumped the sealing scrolls on the counter, spun Aim around in his arms, yanked his mask down, and kissed her like the world was ending. I miss you so much, he muttered, untying her obi and draping it over the fridge. I love you, Ainkoi, and I'm never letting you go. I can live with that, Aim whispered huskily, the genjutsu hiding her starry eye sockets dispelling as she tugged at his Junin vest. Off. Kakashi willingly obliged, then pushed her firmly onto the bed and knelt down to take off her geta and tabi. That achieved, various other items of clothing made their way to the floor and were scattered across the tiny room. Aim was down to underwear, bearing the faint swell of her pregnant belly, and Kakashi was about to shed his trousers when someone knocked on the door. Snarling angrily, he wrenched his mask up over his face, stalked over to the door, and yanked it open just enough to see who he had to kill for interrupting him. The unfortunate Chunin on the doorstep cringed as the Journan's focused ki bore down on him. Ha Hatake-sama, he stuttered, staring in terror at Kopinin's mismatched eyes, the Sharingan in his left eye socket whirling menacingly. The Ho-Ho Hokage would like a WW word. Later, the elite Junin growled. Ha Hatake-sama. Is the village under attack? No. Has anyone militarily significant been assassinated? No. Then it can wait. Kakashi hissed, ki rising even higher. Hatake-sama, the door slammed shut and the lock clicked. The Chunin collapsed to his hands and knees, wheezing in relief as the ki suffocating him was abruptly cut off. Never, ever going to take a message to Hatake Kakashi again. Kakashi returned to the bed in an instant, eyeing his amused lover sprawled across the blankets with raw lust. Now Koi, he purred, pulling his mask down so it pulled around his neck. Where were we? Kakashi did not meet with the Hokage until late in the evening, by which point every single ninja currently in Konohagakure had heard that the Kopinin had brought a girlfriend home from somewhere, and was completely head over heels for her. Being a full geisha took some getting used to, but Naruto absolutely adored being Mitsusha no Beneheim. People openly admired her, gave her presents for no particular reason, and she got to dress up in gorgeous clothes every evening. Of course, the sex was fun too. Naruto had previously wondered what the fuss was about. Most adults he'd observed seemed obsessed with it at some level, but he understood now. At least he understood why girls liked it, and assumed that men had a similar deal. He had promised his Bunshine-san that he wouldn't investigate sex as a boy until his body was ready, which he said was a few years away. Before leaving, Hibanane had given him some books to read, as well as half a dozen Jutsu scrolls and 2 different Bakken. She said they were his heritage, which made him suspicious. Hibanane had told him stories about her dead blonde ninja friend who he had eventually worked out was the Yondaime, but wasn't sure how his hero connected to him. Looks aside. If he were the son of Konoha's greatest hero, surely people would be nicer to him? As it turned out, none of the books were about his possible father. The first 3 were all about Uzumaki's. They were titled The Rise and Fall of Uzushiogakure, Madness and Mayhem, A History of the Uzumaki Clan and Fuinjutsu for Uzumakis, Volume 1 of 16. The last book was handwritten and by a guy called Uzumaki Ritsuken, titled Practical Pranking, How to Transfer Your Skills into a Professional Context, and was all about traps, misdirection, and how to fool enemy shinobi using pranking skills as a foundation for more complex field strategies. It was an inspiration, and Naruto had a great deal of respect for his deceased relatives if they were anything like Ritsuken. The history book was actually interesting, but that was mainly because the Uzumakis had all been interesting people. From the clan's foundation by a middle child of the Ridoku Sannin, creator of ninjutsu, through the foundation of Uzushiogakure, which was covered mainly in the other book, to the destruction of the village and scattering of the scant handful of survivors across the elemental nations. Naruto learned that Uzumakis had been greatly feared, mainly by Kumo and Kiri, and were notorious for their straight, blood-red hair, volcanic tempers and rather peculiar sense of humor. Naruto lacked the hair, but Beneheim, who Hibanane had said was an expression of his hidden genetic traits, had it, which was encouraging. He liked pranks, especially Uzumaki pranks, he thought with an evil laugh as he read about his ancestor Ritsuken's past exploits, and he certainly had the temper. It had taken him a while to be comfortable enough with Hibanane to lose his temper, but she had encouraged him to express himself honestly, and insisted that bottling up his temper was unhealthy. He did always feel better after a good rant in a sealed room and a few hours of intensive taijutsu practice, so that was just one more thing Hibanane was right about. The scrolls contained katas for Uzumaki Kenjutsu, male and female styles, which showed just how many female Uzumakis used swords, that they had created their own special style that took advantage of their different body type. Naruto practiced the kata in his apartment with the bakken provided, grateful for once for his social isolation. He had no neighbors to disturb. As the weeks passed, Naruto got used to his new routine, using the various innocuous prank jutsu in Ritsukunaji's book to lose his Hyuga stalker so he could keep up with his schedule. He attended the academy or pranked various ninja in the mornings and early afternoon, read his books and scrolls in the early afternoon, practiced kata and worked on the beginner's seals in the Fuinjutsu book until early evening, when he would sneak out, travel to the Okiya. Once arrived, he hinged, washed, and dressed for the evening as Beneheim. He ended up staying the night at the Mitsusha more often than not, which frequently meant he arrived late at the academy the next morning. Fortunately, being dead last meant that nobody commented on his tardiness. Reading about the exploits of past Uzumakis was interesting. Uzumaki Mito had married the Shodame, and helped him defeat Uchiha Madara at the Valley of the End. She'd been a Fuinjutsu expert, which was a field most Uzumakis excelled in since it was a clan's specialty. Other than that, there had been Uzumaki ninjutsu specialists, taijutsu masters, kenjutsu masters, a lot of those, and the occasional genjutsu expert. One of the more advanced kenjutsu scrolls had a massive section on one-handed seals, so a ninja could use blade and jutsu at the same time. Naruto had practiced forming the hand seals but hadn't even tried to channel chakra into them yet. The scrolls stressed the importance of good chakra control to make them work, and Naruto had no illusions as to how inadequate his control was. Other than his advances in training, Naruto also had new responsibilities. Being Hibanane's Imuto and successor meant inheriting her client list. That had been an experience. Beneheim was familiar with them all, having served sake, played shamisen or danced for each of them at one time or another. Meeting them and offering her services now that Hibana had moved on went fairly smoothly, The worrying part was that a good half of her Wani-san's regular clientele were ninja. Experienced ninja, elite Chunin to Junin level, and despite 6 years of intensive training, Benheim was still a 12-year-old academy student in Henge on the inside. The training did help her ignore that, at least. She was nonetheless grateful that Naruto's academy instructors were not among Benheim's clients. Shiho-san was her easiest client. The woman came every other Wednesday to drink sake and thrash Benheim at shogi. The Henge redhead got better at the game fairly quickly, but never upped her game when Shiho started to lose her concentration due to the sake. Not that it was a swift process. Shiho was surprisingly sharp even after a dozen dishes of sake, though she did ramble about her job when drunk. She was a codebreaker for the Hokage, not a ninja, but a civilian specially recruited for her analytical ability. Hijiri Shimon was another fairly easy client. A chunin, he came in almost every week for easy conversation, the occasional card game, and to let off steam after missions or dealing with difficult colleagues. He never named names, but Benheim recognized many of them from the descriptions. Naruto had been regularly chased by almost the entire chunin population of the village since he was 8. Where other ninjas spent their mission money on fancy food, alcohol, gambling, or expensive weapons, Shimon spent his on geisha. She suspected that had made him better adjusted than his peers in the long run. Benheim had had sex with him just once, when he had come to the Mitsusha after losing a close friend on a routine mission gone sour. Shimon had been slightly drunk, extremely miserable, and blaming himself. She had distracted him from his downward spiral and channeled his energy into something more enjoyable. Shimon neither mentioned that evening in later sessions nor made advances on her, but he was a little more relaxed and open around her. Benheim even received a brief visit from Shimon's chunin commander from that ill-fated mission, Kamizuki Izumo, who had bowed low and sincerely thanked her for her understanding. Surugaku Tsuzumi was another fairly easy client. Another chunin, he liked to gamble, so they played various card games for trivial stakes like sweets or flowers. He came to the Mitsusha to gamble because it was less expensive than going to a casino and losing his entire salary at poker. He also liked to flirt, which he couldn't really do at the casino. Benheim rather enjoyed his open flattery and silly compliments, and could flirt back without him taking her seriously. Benheim's other ninja clients required more work on her part, each for different reasons. Marino Ibiki was a challenge, not because he had high or exacting standards, but because he was the village's top interrogation specialist. Hibanane's advice had been very clear: never, ever lie and do not show weakness. Ibiki-san had a weekly slot on Saturday mornings as a tokubetsu junin. He could afford it, and spent it relaxing while Benheim either played shamisen or danced, while a meaner eye played from behind a screen. She had initiated sex with him 3 times in 4 months. On each occasion he had been preoccupied by something that prevented her less intimate efforts from distracting and relaxing him. The scarred ninja seemed amused by Benheim's total fearlessness when facing him, which, considering he was nearly 2 meters tall, solid as a brick wall, and specialized in psychological torture, really was something, and occasionally asked her questions, presumably trying to fit her into a mental box. In the interests of maintaining her mystique, Benheim sometimes told the truth, sometimes changed the subject, and sometimes just smiled. He didn't seem to mind, though. Midarashi Anko was only difficult because she demanded intelligent and varied conversation. Other than that, she enjoyed tea ceremonies and was both enthusiastic and scatty, reminding Benheim of Naruto's academy persona. The purple-haired Kunoichi also requested massages from time to time. During the first of these, Benheim had noticed a brand-like seal on her neck. Sensing that Anko was daring her to comment, Benheim ignored the ugly thing completely. Her job was to aid and promote relaxation, not prod at sore spots. Shirane Ginma, another tokubetsu junin, was difficult because he was laid back to the point of passive aggression, although Benheim had to concede that damn Saban of his got irritating as well. His visits were also the most irregular. Once he'd come in twice in 1 week, another time he went a whole month between visits. What he liked was nevertheless consistent. Aminura would play while Benheim danced with her. Tessen and Ginma would drink sake and watch. He had initiated sex on 2 occasions, and both times Benheim found bandages over fresh, still healing scars under his clothes. The smell on him each time indicated he had come to the Okiya straight from the hospital. He also talked in his sleep when he was off duty. How he trained himself not to while on duty was a mystery which had told her more about how Konoha used its ninja than she'd ever wanted to know. Naruto may still have wanted to be a ninja with all his heart, but he no longer carried the illusions his peers did about what his chosen profession would entail. It was other people's dirty work in the shadows that ate at the soul, with brief moments of vindication and long periods of boredom interspersed with abject terror, terrible loss, and profound relief. Ironically, Benheim's most high-maintenance client was a blind chunin called Tobutake Tanbo. Having lost his eyesight and a good portion of his upper face in a misclassified mission, Tanbo had retrained to use his already above-average chakra-sensing abilities to see. This also prevented him from being promoted, as his specialized skills were unlikely to be needed in a solo journey-level mission. These specialized abilities were also why he had become Hibanane's client in the first place. She had been the only geisha in the Hanamachi with sufficient chakra for him to follow her every movement with ease. Beneheim had first met him over a year ago, and he had commented even then on her unusually high chakra levels for a civilian. She hoped he would never become aware of the unusual similarity of Beneheim's and Naruto's chakras. While her Kotaihenji somehow managed to modify her chakra as well as her body, the resemblance was still very close. Fortunately, Tombo had not yet encountered Naruto. His being blind meant he never participated in the post-prank chases at all. Beneheim had decided not to worry about the odds of his discovering her darkest secret, but had to remind herself of that before almost every session. Since the Chunin was blind, she never bothered to put on facial makeup when entertaining him, since he would be unable to appreciate it. Tombo was also the most persistent conversationalist of all her clients, expecting her to talk just as much if not more than he did, and their discussions were both wide-ranging and in-depth. He also really liked touching her hair, her hands, her face, and even when he'd had some sake and loosened up enough her body through her kimono. The gentle feel of his fingers ghosting across her lips always gave Beneheim an incredible thrill. The red-haired geisha could tell that Tombo liked the fact she never flinched when faced with his horrific facial scars. She liked the fact that on those few occasions when the flirting and petting got seriously physical, he was slow, tender, and unbelievably thorough. Sex with Tobitake Tombo was sheer bliss. At the academy, the 4 months since Hibanane left were just more of the same. He still played pranks, although both his skill level and the ranking of his targets were rising rapidly, did badly in class, and sometimes had ramen with Irika-sensei, who was okay for a teacher. He still hadn't mastered the Bunshin Jutsu either. Sasuke was opening up to him inch by inch, although they still fought like cats and dogs and the Uchiha kept calling him Dobe. Naruto retaliated by calling the blue-blooded clan Air Team, which Sasuke seemed to find weirdly satisfying. Sakura was still her violent banshee self, but Naruto found that asking her out had become strangely compulsive. It was probably the vicious refusals. At least he had worked out how to reinforce his head and neck with chakra to protect his brain from impact-induced trauma. There were not quite 4 weeks left before graduation when Naruto finally determined what he wanted to do for his greatest and last prank while in the academy. It would take a lot of setting up and a certain amount of risk, but he was sure the Uchiha Chunin and their friend in the afterlife would get a kick out of it, as would the previous generations of Uzumakis. Having been a student of Namikaze Minato, Kiroi Senku, and Yandame Hokage, who was widely recognized as having been Konoha's greatest ever seal master, Hatake Kakashi liked to think he knew quite a bit about seals. His fiancée, however, had just callously stripped him of that notion, and was doing a number on both his ego and his rational mind. "How is that even possible?" he muttered, staring at the neat piles of bricks and lumber that had once been the home he grew up in. "Seals," she said. "How the hell do seals accomplish this?" The past week had been more than somewhat stressful for the Kopinin. For the major omissions in his report, he had been suspended from active duty for 10 days and his actions since the mission placed under review. After returning to active duty, he would only receive half pay for his missions until the Genin graduation exams. Then he would be given a team to test and, in the words of the Sandame, get them to pass so long as they show minimum competence and adequate potential. This was fairly lenient, and only possible because it was his first serious infraction. Nobody else had been affected, and he was an elite Junin the village really needed. The only good thing about the suspension was that it gave him plenty of time with Ain-chan, who was even more perfect than he remembered. He'd asked her to marry him the evening of the day she had arrived in the village. She accepted with a smile to put the sun to shame, and had spent his free time since following her, as she carried out various self-appointed and esoteric errands around the village. She had received permission to level and replace his former home, wrangled immigration permits for 2 adults other than herself and 13-13 children, 9 of them prospective ninja. The adults were listed as nurse, civilian, and retainer, sworn, both terms suspiciously bland and uninformative. She had also through some mysterious means acquired 5 blank free travel passes for the whole of Haino Kuni, which made Kakashi very wary indeed. Something told him that, although said passes bore the signatures of both the Hokage and the daimyo, the Sandame would not approve of the prospective recipients of those valuable documents. It was only since the previous morning that Aim had actually started on the house. She had spent the first day going over the entire building with brush and ink, occasionally drawing symbols on walls, floors and ceilings, as well as the weighty scrolls she had Kakashi carry for her. This morning she had dragged him out of bright and early and led the way back to the Hatake clan grounds. Not that the clan had ever been very large, where she had him completely unroll the scroll in front of the rather rundown building. Aim had then knelt carefully beside the exposed seal array drawn on the paper and channeled chakra into the central design. The results of her rather mundane actions were what had the Kopinin questioning his sanity as, before his shocked eye, the house neatly and efficiently disassembled itself. Aim had left him standing there and wandered over to the newly exposed foundations, again armed with brush and ink, muttering over yet another good-sized scroll. Kakashi wondered distantly if there was a bingo book warning above "Flee on sight" to classify his fiancée with. Avoid known haunts, perhaps? Kakashi! My eternal rival! Boomed a voice by his ear. What are you doing at such a youthful hour of the morning? Oh, Guy, it's you, said Kakashi dully, noting that Guy had a bowl-cut, thick-eyebrowed, green spandex-clad mini-me vibrating with enthusiasm behind him. Is that one of his students or some kind of clone? I'm watching my fiancé single-handedly deconstruct my family home. Guy looked taken aback. You are to be wed? He asked in slightly less ear-shattering tones. He turned push-ups, my youthful student. Then asked the silver-haired Junin more quietly, how long have you known her, Kakashi? Long enough, the copy-nin replied lazily, knowing that 2 weeks the time he'd actually spent with her wouldn't cut it, and he didn't want to reveal the nature of her bloodline just yet. I love her, and I'm going to marry her. Guy's eyes widened. You are in love? YOSH. Congratulations on your youthful achievement, my eternal rival. He boomed happily, but this is one expression of youth I cannot match, alas. Tears streamed down his face as he lunged for Kakashi, immobilizing his fellow Junin in a manly hug as inescapable as the victim found it mortifying. Kakashi! I am so happy for you! Kakashi cringed as the infamous and unbreakable sunset jutsu came into being behind him. Somebody put me out of my misery, please. Nichibatsu no jutsu, Fuin! The beach and sunset vanished as if someone had flicked a switch. Kakashi took advantage of Guy's surprise to escape, stumbling back and staring at Aim, who had just pulled off something previously believed impossible. Aim-chan, how? He breathed reverently. The starry-eyed young woman smiled mischievously. Aren't seals wonderful? If I hadn't already asked you to marry me, I would now, Kakashi said solemnly and not altogether in jest. Don't worry, Kashi-kun, I'll protect you from the big bad time-space distortions/ritual genjutsu hybrid, Aim said teasingly. Now do you want the good news or the bad news first? My eternal rival. Introduce me to your most youthful fiancé. Guy interrupted, finding his voice again. Of course. Guy, this is Amamai-hana, my fiancé. Ainkoi, this is Mado Guy, Junin of Kanehagakure. Greetings, Amamai-hana-san. I am Mado Guy, beautiful green beast of Konoha. And this is my youthful student, Rock Lee. The mini-guy, who up until this point had been diligently doing push-ups, bounced to his feet with appalling energy. Greetings, Amamai-hana-san. Call me Aim-mai, Guy-san, Lee-kun, Aim said, rolling up the small scroll containing the sunset genjutsu and pocketing it. My full name is too much of a mouthful for every day. How youthful of you, Amamai-san. Tell me, how did you meet my eternal rival? Guy asked. There was a short pause. HM? Sorry, Guy-san, my mind was elsewhere. What was it you said? Aim asked, turning her head and blinking innocently at the spandex-clad nin. Kakashi managed barely not to laugh, but under the mask he was grinning like a loon. Ainko, I adore you. Ack. My eternal rival's fiancé is just as hip and cool as he is. Guy ranted, completely unnoticed by said fiancé. Kakashi? Good news or bad news? She repeated, still staring thoughtfully into space while nibbling the handle of her calligraphy brush. Bad news first, please, Koi, he told her, fighting the urge to steal the brush and kiss her senseless. Right. Bad news is that there isn't quite enough space for what I had in mind. But good news is I can fix that fairly easily. How exactly? Kakashi asked cautiously, wary of the manic gleam in his lover's eye. More seals, of course, Aim replied, bouncing happily on her toes. I love seals, she chirped. Everyone out the gate unless they wish to experience an intermolecular self-replicating expansion. Anbu-san up in the tree, this means you as well. I don't want Hokage-sama giving me grief because I accidentally exploded one of his ninja while creating my stable subspace pocket. Kakashi ran for it out of the gate. Guy and Mini-Guy wasn't he called Lee, close behind him while the ANBU vaulted over the boundary wall. What is she doing, Hataki-san? The Ukami-masked ANBU asked as Aim's chakra level rose noticeably and her kimono fluttered in a non-existent breeze. Honestly, Wolf-san, I think I prefer not to know, Kakashi admitted as thin streams of chakra exploded from Aim's body and began etching complex steel arrays into the walls surrounding the compound. What she can do with seals makes Jiraiya-sama look like an academy student. A very slow academy student. I saw what she did to the sunset genjutsu, Hataki-san, the ANBU admitted with no small amount of awe in his voice. Do you think she would be willing to hand it over to us? I believe Marino-san has wanted to test that genjutsu's efficacy on prisoners for a while now. I'll ask her, Kakashi promised, envisioning the dreaded unbreakable sunset genjutsu being used to traumatize the enemies of Konoha. He couldn't keep himself from cackling a little. Hataki-san? Just wondering how Itachi would react to that genjutsu, Wolf-san. The ANBU paused. I too would like to see the traitor's reaction to a genjutsu his eye cannot penetrate, let alone break, the ninja admitted, especially considering the Sharingan's mnemonic component. Kakashi cackled again. He himself had taken care to keep his Sharingan covered after one particular catastrophically traumatic encounter with that evil genjutsu. He had enough trouble repressing that incident as it was without repeating it. More ninja were arriving on the scene, drawn by the high levels of unfamiliar chakra. Hey, Kakashi! Is that your supposedly civilian girlfriend? Shiraniganma asked, chewing on the ever-present senbon. Hi. She's rewriting reality, Kakashi said absently, his brain having supplied a solution to the space issue that fitted with intermolecular self-replicating expansion and stable subspace pocket. Genma's jaw dropped and the senbon drooped dangerously low. Though that's even possible? Apparently it can be done with seals, Kakashi said mildly, eye on his fiancée, whose chakra was now pulsing steadily. Then the trees started exploding. Kakashi hadn't known trees could go from solid green and boring to expanding fireball of doom that quickly. Raising his Hittite off his Sharingan eye, he gaped at what his newly exposed eye revealed. They're going from solid to powder so fast it's practically instantaneous. It's not just the trees, the grass is exploding too. Even more ninja were in the audience by now, no doubt drawn by the noise and house-sized fireballs rising above the skyline. Kakashi? Why am I not surprised? The copy-nin winced as the Hokage's dry tones were heard between explosions. Gomen nasai, Sandame-sama, my fiancé is remodeling. There was a weird whistling sound and the space inside the compound shivered, twisted, and stretched. It made Kakashi's Sharingan hurt, and he yanked his Hittite down over the streaming eye as his brain screamed, but that's physically impossible. Aim appeared between the gateposts, a huge smile on her face. Finished. The Hitaki compound is now larger on the inside than on the outside. There was a pause filled with the silence of abject psychological shock. Ma, how much bigger Ain-chan? Kakashi asked, curious despite himself. I quadrupled the area. His lover chirped proudly. Sorry about the trees, though. Are there any spare ones I can transplant to replace them once I've got the house built? It shouldn't take me more than a fortnight. Probably a bit less. The Hokage found his voice first. I can arrange someone to replace the lost trees, Amamai Hana-san, he managed faintly, provided you agree to an ANBU guard until the construction process is finished. Call me Amai please, Hokage-sama. My name's a bit long to use all the time. But yes, that's great. Now can someone tell me where to find some ninja called Marino-san? I heard he wanted an unbreakable sunset jutsu to experiment with, and I have one sealed in here, she waved a scroll. My fiancé, Kakashi decided, is completely off her head. And I wouldn't have her any other way. 2 weeks later, the new Hitaki mansion, it was too large to be called a mere house, was finished, mostly furnished and ready to be moved into. Aim was still busy landscaping the grounds with a tiger-masked ANBU with the Mokutan Kekai Genkai that Kakashi remembered from his own ANBU days. He seemed rather bemused by the night-eyed young woman's enthusiasm for trees, but held up better than most of her previous ANBU minders had. He had yet to start muttering to himself, twitching uncontrollably or spacing out for whole minutes at a time, despite almost 2 whole days of continuous exposure to Ain-chan's foibles. Kakashi suspected the younger man found the attention flattering. Of course, with his fiancée gardening, he had to finish unpacking by himself. Thankfully, Aim's belongings were still mostly sealed in their scrolls, and all the larger items had also been sealed according to room, making the process far easier. Aim had even drawn him a map of the building with all the rooms labeled. Pausing on the doorstep, Kakashi formed the necessary hand seal for the shadow clone jutsu. Here, everybody pick a scroll. The sooner I finish the unpacking, the sooner I can persuade her to try the new bed, he said, grabbing one for himself. Suitably motivated, the 8 clones each grabbed a scroll and shined off to get their part done. The original made his way to the western wing of the mansion, scroll tucked under one arm. 1 month left until the genin exams, then another 3 months until the babies are due, probably a little less. The ANBU Medine, who had been on duty the previous week, had dragged both of them to the hospital for a checkup once he discovered that Aim was expecting more than one baby. The doctor at the hospital had warned him that multiple pregnancies often resulted in premature births. She had also tried to get Aim to agree to become less active, but his fiancée had stared the doctor down, starry eyes glinting menacingly, saying firmly that her Kekai Genkai was infamous for preventing the complications usually associated with multiple pregnancies. Her exact words had been, up to 5 before the body adopts serious modifications, up to 15 before nutrient levels become an issue, which had been both a shock and a relief. The mere idea of 15 babies all at once was a touch overwhelming. Aim was only just starting to show a gently expanding curve on her abdomen through her clothes. The idea that his children were growing in there was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. What if they got hurt? Okay, it was unlikely all things considered. Aim Koi breaks the rules like she doesn't know they're there, but still. Kunoichi weren't supposed to be able to use chakra beyond the first stages of pregnancy, but Aim's sealing demonstrations over the past 2 weeks had proved that regardless of the norm there was nothing impeding her from accessing large quantities of chakra. Thank you very much. Kakashi shivered, pausing in his self-appointed task as the memory of Ibiki's delight of receiving a copy of the Sunset Jutsu to play with resurfaced. Aim had called it a time-space distortion/ritual genjutsu hybrid, which had prompted inquiry as none of the Konoha ninja had heard of ritual genjutsu before. Aim had explained that visual effects such as fangirl eye hearts, embarrassed sweat drops and angry facial tics were all examples of ritual genjutsu, activated by a specific action or emotion. The infamous Sunset Genjutsu was activated by Mato Gai's passionately youthful manhug. On hearing the explanation, Marino Ibiki had murmured about exploring the possibilities with such interest as to send a shiver down the spines of all those present. Aim also explained that the time-space element of the genjutsu was created because the will of the caster guy was so powerful and sincere that it distorted reality, creating a temporary pocket dimension. Thus the ritual genjutsu morphed into a time-space ninjutsu, which was why it could not be unraveled and refused to break on Kai. Kakashi shivered again as he moved into the next room. Evil thing. 3 weeks before the Genin graduation exam, Beneheim had tea with a new client who asked for her personally. Amai was new to the village, had some kind of jujitsu, was rumored to be involved with one of the village's handful of elite Junin, and was definitely pregnant. Beneheim was almost certain she was Hibanabunshin's Anabozu. With this in mind, the henge redhead had rather been looking forward to this particular session. Amamai was exactly the same height as Hibanane, and only slightly kavia, which could be attributed to the pregnancy. Her hair was thigh-length rather than waist-length and caramel-colored rather than Hibana's dark coffee, and in the place of Hibanane's green-gray eyes, Amamai's eye sockets were filled with inky blackness littered with hundreds of tiny stars. The facial structure and skin color were also fairly similar, but no one who had only ever seen Hibanane in her geisha makeup would ever associate the two women. Where Hibana had been calm, gentle and patient, if implacable when angered, Amamai was friendly, scattered and slightly manic with chakra reserves so vast Beneheim could feel them pressing against the edge of her perception even when she wasn't actively sensing chakra. Beneheim-chan. The woman squealed as soon as she entered the room where the geisha was waiting for her, enfolding the red head in an exuberant hug. It's wonderful to see you firsthand at long last. I've wanted to meet Miyamoto for so long. Oh, where are my manners? She let go, stepped back and bowed slightly. Watashi wa amamai hana desu, but please call me Aim-ne. Beneheim couldn't help smiling. Aim radiated vibrant joy the same way Naruto radiated sheer energy. Of course, Aim-ne. It is lovely to meet you at last. I'd like to meet my Otoro soon as well, Aim added obliquely, calming down a bit as she settled on a cushion. Could you organize it? Beneheim was grateful for Aim-ne's discretion. Considering her responsibilities, it would be catastrophic for both her personally and the entire Okiya were it to get out that Musashi no Beneheim and Uzumaki Naruto were one and the same. The past 4 months had tempered Naruto in ways his classmates would never understand. He realized now that he needed Beneheim to keep him balanced. Naturally, Aim-ne-san, Beneheim said, quietly happy for her new Nizen's recognition of her other self. Can I offer you some more tea? Aim accepted the tea, drank it slowly and left, agreeing to meet her Ototo at his place tomorrow after school. Beneheim was glad the next day was a Thursday with no personal clients at all, enabling her to cancel all appointments without upsetting anyone. The first thing Aim-ne did upon meeting Naruto was to wrap him in a tight hug. It was so like Hibanane, the first and only woman to hug him while he was boy-shaped, that Naruto promptly burst into tears. Aim-ne didn't show the slightest irritation at his breakdown, just closing the front door behind her, carrying him over to the couch and sitting down with him still wrapped around her rather swollen middle. She did not in any way indicate that his behavior was wrong or shameful, quietly rubbing his back and crooning until he'd got control over his emotions again, then asking what he'd been up to since Hibanane left. Naruto instantly plunged into a monologue on the wonderful books on Uzumakis he'd been given, how he'd been practicing his katas real hard and expounding his budding understanding of Fuinjutsu, as well as the pranks he'd pulled and how he thought Sasuke was warming to him a little. Aimne listened, nodded, laughed in the right places and corrected him here and there on seals. Naruto wondered as he spoke if this was what having a mother felt like. Hibanine had always advised him, listened to his woes and offered solutions, but she had been a geisha to the bone. She had never snuggled with him and let him ramble on like Aimne was doing now. His new Neisan was acting like mothers he had seen behave towards their children, and it was even more wonderful than he'd imagined it to be. By the end of the conversation, Naruto determined that Hibana was to Aimne what Beneheim was to him, just a facet of a larger whole, and the pregnant, dark blonde woman slid effortlessly into the space in his heart Hibanine had only partly filled. That gave him the courage to ask the question that had been bothering him since he began reading about his heritage. Aimne? If my mother was an Uzumaki, who was my father? I'm not really allowed to say, Naruto, but I'm sure that given your appearance, and what I've told you, you can make an educated guess. Naruto blinked, shocked but not really surprised. He had suspected, but... Yandame-sama? But... Why does everyone hate me and treat me like shit? Language, Naruto, Aim said calmly. They don't know, or at least they haven't been told. Your parentage was hidden to protect you from vengeful Iwanin out to exterminate the family of the Konoha no Kiroi Senku. So why do they hate me? Aimne-chan shrugged. You were born on the day the Kyuubi ravaged Konoha, and when both it and the Yandame lost their lives, looked just like their hero did as a child, yet also have whisker marks and a few other foxy mannerisms. Naruto thought about it. They think I'm Kyuubi? That's just stupid, he protested. Very true. But the Kyuubi no Yoko was the most powerful of the Bijou, all of which are ridiculously strong. It killed many and completely terrified those fortunate to survive its rampage. The villagers fear that it is not truly defeated and may rise again, while some of the shinobi are resentful for the loss of their loved ones. But that in no way excuses their treatment of you. You suffer unjustly. Life, however, is not and never has been fair, so you will just have to live with their idiocy. Naruto snuggled closer to the woman who had filled the mother-shaped hole in his heart and helped him learn so much about his birth parents. Arigato, Aimne. He paused. If no one knows, how do you know? Aimne pointed to the dark starry pools that filled her eye sockets. My bloodline enables me to see the past, as well as events occurring great distances away from wherever I happen to be. Suga. Will the baby be able to do that? Aim smiled wryly. I sincerely hope not. It is a rare combination bloodline and very difficult to deal with. They'll probably get one of my other latent Kekai Genkai. Besides, Naruto, it's babies. I'm going to have triplets. Naruto's eyes widened. Can I be Naruto-ji-chan? Of course. You are my one and only Naruto-toto, aren't you? Naruto smiled so widely it hurt. He loved his new Aimne-chan so very much. Naruto did not see Aimne very much in those last few weeks before graduation. She was busy organizing all manner of grown-up things and spending time with her Junin boyfriend, whose name the blonde still didn't know. Likewise, Naruto was also busy with lessons, training and planning his ultimate prank. His chakra control, while greatly improved, still wasn't precise enough for the stupid Bunshin Jutsu. He channeled his frustration into creating a prank version of his Kotaihenge. The adult magazine he'd found in Gigi's office was very helpful, although a small part of him would have been happy not knowing his grandfather figure was a bit of a perv. The blonde had acquired by osmosis his geisha Wani-san's disdain for porn and perverts. Women were companions, helpers and attractive distractions from life's hardships, not sex toys. Plus, perverts were icky. His Oryoku no Jutsu was a prank technique, but he could also see its potential as a distraction. More usefully, if people thought it was a rather crude prank, they wouldn't even think to look into its more practical applications. The day before graduation, Naruto pulled his prank masterpiece, painting the faces of the Hokages on the side of the mountain overlooking Konoha. He made a point of ensuring his additions were artistic. Getting chased around the village by Chunin, various Junin and half a dozen Anbyu was also great fun. He spotted a lot of familiar faces, many of which were having trouble holding back laughter. He let Iruka-sensei catch him just after lunch. The man was the best academy sensei he'd ever had, then compounded his mischief by using the Chunin as a test subject for his centerfold technique. Of course, Iruka-sensei was horribly embarrassed by his reaction to girl Naruto and gave him detention, but the blonde knew his other self was actually very, very beautiful even for a woman and didn't hold the nosebleed against the Chunin. Naruko-chan was tall, curvy and very sexy indeed. She even got a reaction out of Sasuke, firmly disproving Naruto's theory that the Uchiha might be gay. The only catch was that the girls in class were jealous of his girlish figure, which made them angry and, sadly, violent. Thankfully his detention with Irika-sensei prevented them from pounding him to mush, although washing the Hokage mountain was not how he'd wanted to spend his afternoon. He did get ramen out of it afterwards though. Beneheim's evening at the Mitsusha was most entertaining, as she got to listen to Shimon-san's recount of the chase as well as his appreciation of the stealth and sheer balls Naruto had shown in pulling the prank. The Uchiha Chunin and Obito-san in the afterlife must be laughing themselves sick. Shimon-san also gallantly accompanied her to the graves of the dead Uchiha so she could leave flowers. She told the curious Chunin that she'd only known them in passing, but that they'd enjoyed Uzumaki-kun's pranks. Take care of yourself, Beneheim-chan, Shimon-san told her before taking his leave on returning her to the Okiya. You're something special. Graduation day was difficult. He woke up late and had to dash out without a proper breakfast. Aimne had warned him she couldn't pick him up afterwards as she had an urgent appointment, but had promised to make it up to him the next day and celebrate his joining the ninja ranks together. He was also very worried about the Bunshin Jutsu. His written test was much harder than it had been in previous years, which was weird since it wasn't just a genjutsu like some previous would-be senseis had done once or twice. The poorly balanced kunai he was given for his weapons test compounded his suspicions, and being asked to perform the Bunshin as his ninjutsu test was the fish cake on top of the ramen. His genin test was being maliciously sabotaged. His stupid, ignorant, blind Chunin instructors had confused him with a mountain-sized fox demon and wanted to prevent him from ever becoming a ninja. He tried the Bunshin Jutsu, failed miserably and slouched despondently outside to the swing, ruthlessly suppressing the urge to cry. Aimne will be back tomorrow. I can cry then. Thank goodness Beneheim has no clients until tomorrow evening. I'd be useless tonight. Naruto sighed heavily. At least he could still be a geisha. Even if nobody except Aimne ever acknowledged him as Uzumaki Naruto, Beneheim would still be appreciated, and that was almost as good. Even though that almost hurts inside. When Mizuki found him to commiserate with his failure, Naruto only listened with half an ear to what the assistant teacher had to say about Irika. But when the silvery-haired Chunin offered him a last-ditch chance to graduate, Naruto leapt for it. It was his last chance to live life openly without having to lie about who he was just to get people to treat him normally. It was only after he had knocked out Hokage with his Oryoke and opened the scroll out in the woods that Naruto began to feel misgivings. The Kage Bunshin no Jutsu was incredibly useful and fairly easy for a person with chakra reserves like his, but it definitely wasn't a genin-level technique. Neither were the other jutsus in the scroll, one of which looked suspiciously like the seal on his stomach. I really have to get around to asking Aimne about that thing. He quickly memorized the hand seals and descriptions for the Kage Kunai no Jutsu, Kage Shuriken no Jutsu and Bunshin Bakuha. He really liked the look of that one, however chakra-intensive it was, before rolling up the scroll and slinging it over his back, seething with anger as he leapt into the trees. This was the real Forbidden Scroll. Mizuki was trying to get him into trouble with the Hokage. Naruto quickly formed 2 Kage Bunshin. He loved this jutsu already, and has one henge into the Forbidden Scroll. The Naruto clone sat down in the middle of the clearing, its scroll-henged fellow laid out before it, and settled down to wait and see what would happen next. The original Naruto in the tree suppressed his chakra as far down as it would go, unfolded a fine gauze sheet over himself and the real scroll, and used Kakuremino no Jutsu, the false surroundings technique, on it to hide his presence. Now all he had to do was sit still and wait until the conspirators came to find him. To his great personal disappointment, Irika was the first to burst into the clearing. However, when confronted by the Naruto clone's feigned clueless enthusiasm, he seemed genuinely surprised. Maybe it wasn't a conspiracy after all. The hail of kunai Irika took protecting the clone, and Mizuki's subsequent arrival confirmed that it really was all the other Chunin's fault. Then Mizuki dropped the bomb, figuratively speaking, by informing the Naruto clone that it was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. Of course, the idiot said that Naruto was really the fox, but the blonde hidden in the tree knew better than to believe that garbage. He'd studied Jinchuriki as part of his education on other nations and cultures with Himitsu Oka-san. At least that explained why he had the aforementioned big-ass seal over his navel gate. It is also a far more likely explanation of why the morons are so convinced I'm a demon in human form. The clone froze at this point, undecided as to an appropriate course of action, which Mizuki took advantage of to throw one of his Fuma shuriken at it. Unfortunately, Irika-sensei, not knowing that it was a clone, shielded it with his own body, which both clone and original found deeply distressing. Mizuki then revealed Irika's hatred of the Kyuubi, prompting Irika's own avowal that he didn't hate Naruto, who wasn't the fox at all, and the clone seized the opportunity to leg it out of the clearing. Once out of sight of the 2 Chunin, both clone and scroll clone dispersed. The sudden influx of memories from both gave Naruto all kinds of interesting ideas, making him wish he carried a notebook to write them down in. He dropped quietly from the trees as soon as both Chunin took off towards where they thought he had gone, hid the scroll in a bush and followed after them at a jog. Mizuki was a traitor to Leaf, that much was clear, so he needed to be dealt with. Naruto wasn't sure that gentle, caring Yumino Iruka was up to killing his former teaching assistant. Naruto knew he could kill someone who threatened those he cared for. As Benaheim, he had slashed the throat of a would-be rapist attacking Momo-chan. Hibanane had held him through the tears, soothed him through the rage, and helped him find peace rather than succumb to depression. He had hated it, still hated the idea of killing, but Mizuki had admitted to being a traitor to Konohagakure and broken what was apparently a major law. For that he would die. When he found the two Chunin, he almost tututade. Fooled by henge? Real henge, a mere genjutsu? They were getting lax. Mizuki's second attempt to murder Iruka-sensei made Naruto angry. Luckily, he caught the feeling on its way up and converted the dangerous surge of Berserk Uzumaki Fury into several hundred shadow clones, which pounded Mizuki into the ground with little effort, while he centered himself and regained control. Then Iruka put his own Hitaide on Naruto, pronouncing him a genin, and the blonde Jinchuriki's heart nearly burst with joy. He had made it. The next morning Naruto woke up late again and narrowly avoided drinking the spoilt milk festering quietly in his fridge. The power had obviously failed again. Stupid civilians mistaking me for a mountain-sized chakra fox. If I was the Kyuubi, I'd have killed them all years ago. He made do with a pair of oranges, not wanting to be late for the team assignments. Naruto had already decided to keep his academy persona, at least mostly, up until he'd determined whether his Jonin-sensei hated him and discussed it properly with Aine. Depending on who his teammates and sensei were, it might be safer to keep it up. He arrived in class before Iruka-sensei, so he wasn't late. However, his enthusiasm was swiftly killed by the sight of both Yamanaka Ino and Haruno Sakura arguing about who would get to sit next to Sasuke-kun. Sasuke was, of course, ignoring them both. Today that irritated him. If Sasuke told them to stop being so immature and act like real kunoichi, they would do it. His stubborn refusal to get involved just made the lives of his other, saner classmates more difficult. Naruto quietly positioned himself so he could look Sasuke dead in the eye and glared at the grumpy Uchiha. Sasuke's eyebrow twitched, then lowered, matching him glare for glare. Naruto bared a fawn-like canine. "Oh, you are so on team." Unfortunately, another boy jostled Naruto from behind at this point, making the blonde fall forward. Right onto the last Uchiha. The fangirls were silenced as Sasuke's lips met Naruto's. The whisker-marked blonde had a split second to categorize his opinion of the kiss: too young to be my type, too broody by half, and far too unwilling to accept much-needed help before Sakura yanked him away from the black-haired boy. Surrounded by irate fangirls, Naruto swallowed nervously and surreptitiously reinforced his entire body with chakra. "I am so dead. Iruka-sensei, please hurry. I'm counting on you here." Iruka-sensei arrived and interrupted the beating with his big head no jutsu before the crazed fangirls could actually break any of his bones. Naruto quickly shimmied into the contested seat next to Sasuke, muttering, "Don't worry, team, you wouldn't be my type even if I were a girl," which got a snort of almost amusement from the other boy. Sasuke speak was a language unto itself, but Naruto was fairly conversant. That last grunt had been a thank the kami, and it will never be referred to again. Most Sasuke speak was body language, with actual vocalization acting as punctuation or emphasis. Iruka-sensei finished his incredibly boring speech on their new shinobi duties and announced the teams. Numbers 1 to 6 were all fangirls and boys from mainly civilian families. Naruto doubted even one of those teams would pass. Team 7 is Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, and Uzumaki Naruto. Your Jonin-sensei is Hatake Kakashi. Naruto slumped forward and groaned quietly while Sakura ranted, loudly celebrating her triumph. "HN Dobe?" Naruto translated this to, "Why aren't you pleased to be on the same team as Sakura?" "I only pursue her because it's funny, team," Naruto muttered, face on the desk. "She hates my acting like a fanba, yet she behaves exactly the same way around you." HN, with a discreet twitch of the lips, "Too true, yes, it is funny after all." "And bloody Hatake as well," Naruto rambled on sotto voce. "He's never punctual." HN? Hatake Kakashi is always several hours late to anything short of an A-ranked mission or a national emergency. What? Don't look at me like that, team. So I eavesdrop. It's practically a virtue among ninja. Sasuke raised an eyebrow and frowned at him assessingly. HN. Of course I'm not as stupid as I look, team. No ninja is that dumb. This way people underestimate me. You won't give the game away, will you? HN. Sasuke turned to look out of the window as Iruka called the final teams. Aburame Shino, Hyuga Hinata, and Inazuka Kiba under Yuhi Kurinai, a genjutsu expert and a friend of Anko-san's, made up Team 8. Lee's Team 9 from last year were still genin, So the last team was Team 10, Akamichi Chuji, Naro Shikamaru and Yamanaka Ino with Sarutobi Asuma as their Jonin sensei, a new Ino Shikacho team to follow in their father's footsteps. In a way, Naruto was glad no one was aware of his probable parentage. That would have been a lot of pressure and far too many unreasonable expectations. He had no idea how Sasuke coped. Wait, he doesn't. That explains it. Hey Sasuke, want me to help you escape for lunch? HN? Slightly scornful. How could you possibly assist me, Dobe? I learned a new jutsu earning this. Naruto tapped his Hittite, and now I can make solid clones. I'll henge one to look like you and we can make our escape while the fangirls are distracted by the decoy. Sasuke paused, obviously torn between remaining detached and aloof and escaping the screaming horde. He eventually dipped his chin in acceptance. Excellent, Naruto whispered sibilantly, fingers discreetly forming the cross seal for Kage Bunshin. Both clones materialized on the ground 2 stories below the open window, one instantly henji into the last Uchiha. See him? Naruto murmured. Think you can kawarimi with him, team? Easily, Dobe, Sasuke muttered scornfully, hands already under the desk and performing the needed hand seals. Naruto swiftly followed suit, and both were outside the academy building and walking towards the center of the village by the time the lunch bell rang. Hey Sasuke! Want to go for some ramen? I'll pay, Naruto suggested in normal tones. Sasuke shrugged. Fine, be that way, Naruto groused, leading the way towards Ichiraku's ramen stand. You do know that if you talked more the girls wouldn't find you so cool and mysterious, don't you? Sasuke grunted, following a step behind and a little to the right of the blonde. Well, they don't know you're quiet because you have nothing positive to say to them. They just think your tragic past makes you cool. Naruto growled in his throat. There's nothing romantic about pain. Pain just hurts, making it entirely lacking in redeeming features. It's how you react to pain that counts. Sasuke looked at him oddly following this outburst, but didn't stop following him. And here we are, Ichiraku's finest ramen in Konoha. Hey, I am Chan. I brought a new customer. Naruto-kun. Congratulations on graduating, the ramen girl said warmly. Who's your friend? This is Uchiha Sasuke, my new teammate, Naruto said with a broad, foxy smile. Team, this is Ayam-chan, her dad owns the stand. Sasuke managed a konnichiwa, Ayam-san, then sat down on one of the stools and reached for a menu. All of the flavors are really good, Naruto said conversationally, still not shouting in his usual idiot fashion. He knew Sasuke would never divulge this new behavior to anyone else. It wasn't the brooding boy's way. But I like miso and pork best. Though beef is nice, too, he trailed off thoughtfully. Anyway, pork for me, Ayam-chan. Shrimp, Sasuke said to Ayam, his tone as friendly as Naruto had ever heard it, meaning it wasn't outright sulky. Coming up, boys. As soon as Ayam's attention was elsewhere, Sasuke turned to face Naruto. What's up with you today, Uzumaki? Noting that Sasuke was serious enough to forego the habitual dobe, Naruto responded in kind. People really don't like me for some reason, Sasuke. It's not the pranks, they hated me before that. I thought it might be my parents, but I never knew them, so I can't verify that either. So I hide my real self away so people don't try to hurt me. No one feels threatened by the idiot dead last, do they? Sasuke paused thoughtfully. You did badly on purpose? Only in class? I'm damn good with kunai and shuriken, as you know, but I was given poorly balanced ones in the exam. And you know exactly how good I am in taijutsu. Sasuke smirked. You're not bad, he conceded as Ayam served them their ramen. Itadakimasa. Naruto chirped happily, snapping his chopsticks apart, then paused before digging in. Friends? Sasuke cracked his own chopsticks apart and started his meal. Good enough for me, Naruto shrugged before attacking his own bowl of ramen. He'd barely finished when the memories of one of the dispelled shadow clones reached him, and he shivered. Dobe? Your clone was just dispelled. Your fangirls are seriously creepy, you know. Sakura's going to whine about your escaping into thin air, though. Sasuke indicated, without making a sound, that Sakura could go hang for all he cared. Yes, but unfortunately Genin teams always have 3 members. We lose her now and we won't get to be Genin. Yes, it is a shame, but that's life for you. Everyone starts off in a 3-man Genin cell under a Jonin sensei. We can't ditch her until we make Chunin. Sasuke said decisively. As fast as possible, I'm with you. Shall we wander back? The next 3 hours were sheer torture. All the other Jounin collected their teams in the first half hour, leaving Naruto and Sasuke to suffer through Sakura's schizoid fawning, paranoia and growing rage at their sensei's tardiness. Sasuke, forewarned of the Jounin's habitual lateness, sat and brooded in silence. Naruto blocked his ears with chakra and, after balancing the chalkboard eraser over the door, went over the very interesting new books Aimne had given him in his head. One of them was on sign language, another on fan language, and a third on standard, in other words, non-Uzumaki sealing techniques. Unfortunately, Sakura noticed he was ignoring her and bopped him over the head. Baka! Naruto blinked. Did you say something, Sakura? He asked as the door opened. The 3 genin turned to look. There was a thud as the dust-covered eraser bounced off the gravity-defying silver hair of their new sensei. Sasuke smirked, Naruto shoved his fist in his mouth to smother his snickers, and Sakura blushed scarlet in embarrassment. My first impression of you 3 is, I hate you. But Blondie at least has the right attitude. Naruto ignored the words. Their sensei didn't mean them in the slightest. He was, however, about the most opaque ninja Naruto had ever seen in either form, his entire being shrouded in a lazy, apathetic persona who reminded the blonde rather forcefully of Shikamaru. The cloth mask covering the lower half of his face and the hattai pulled down over his left eye didn't help much, either. We'll talk on the roof. The Jounin shun shined away in a swirl of leaves. Sakura hurried out the door towards the stairs, followed by a slouching Sasuke and a thoughtful Naruto.